Now, to officially kickstart the forum, I would like to invite Dato Mohammad Faiz Azmi, Chairman of Securities Commission Malaysia and Chair of the Advisory Committee on Sustainability Reporting, to deliver his opening remarks. Please join me in welcoming him to the stage.
Members of the Advisory Committee on the Sustainable Reporting, Dato, speakers, preparers, guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A very good morning. I take it many of you have not been in this auditorium before, right? Okay. So that's why we had a safety video. Anyway, so firstly, let me welcome you to the Securities Commission, and on a topic which, if I had to say, was the most common from preparers, it was about the access to data. So that's why we decided to actually have a session on data, but it's not just one way. Again, that's us telling you things. We would like to also get some feedback from you as to what exactly are you seeing. So to give you an idea, there is this joint committee between ourselves and Bank Negara, JC3. Some of you, well, I guess the FIs would have heard of it, right? And they did an analysis of data that's needed for reporting. And if I'm not mistaken, they came up with a conclusion that 6% of data that you need is secret. But 27% of the data that you need, and that's where NAHRIM comes in, is available but subject to condition. So one of the things that we've set ourselves a task in ACSR is to try and find out what specifically do you need in order to be able to answer those questions. But I have to tell you, it's an evolving topic. A few days ago, last week actually, we had something called the COFA Challenge. Now, the COFA Challenge is something we're doing with universities. But one of the participants on the panelists, she represents a fund. She was quite proud of the fact that she voted against 96 directors in 23 companies for not doing enough. And what intrigued me was she wasn't talking about ISSB disclosures and emissions. She was saying that they don't seem to have an adaptation plan. So why is she so fussed about that? So I started reading some articles, and then I realized what she meant. You see, many of you can control everything up to your pagar, but the assumption is that someone else will look after it outside. Surely government, surely state. But the question is that assumption fair? So just have a think about this. There was a place in France where they had a drought, and a bottling factory was told, you might as well close down because we've reserved the water for the people. So the assumption was that I will always get water. Not true. There's another example I saw in Europe where a bakery was told that they had to reduce their future expansion because they had promised all the additional power, because bakers are driven by electric. They had promised all the available power to the data center that was being built. Again, your assumption is whenever you need power, Tenaga will give it to you. So I'm not saying we're going to put that in now. I'm just saying that whatever we do now, it's evolving. And all of it is really designed to make sure that you're ready. The other thing I'll just say before I get into the main speech is that another panelist made a very interesting comment. You see, I always thought the first people to suffer from climate change would be the Arabs, because they're hot. If you've ever been to the Middle East during summer, you know why they come here, because it's less hot. But actually, no, that the first area, if you like, to experience climate change will be the island, Barbados, Fiji. Many of them may cease to exist. But the second area most vulnerable in the world is ASEAN. Okay? And what the speaker said, which I thought, kind of made me think, was, please don't look around the world for ideas, because people are looking to us for the idea, because we are the second most vulnerable place in the world. And so I think about a month ago, I went to the Philippines. I didn't know they actually have something called the Climate Commission, whose sole job it is to figure out whether or not there's enough adaptation financing to survive the typhoons that the Philippines. I mean, we get one bad rainstorm, kita complain, kan? They get 26 on average, 26 typhoons. So that's a good way to start. So again, welcome to the Securities Commission. Now, our approach in the Advisory Committee of Sustainable Reporting, ACR, is quite clear. It's to help you get across the line. And that's why we are looking and actively trying to figure out what we can do to help you. So climate risk, as I mentioned, is not a distant or abstract concept. We are among the most climate vulnerable countries in Asia, facing increasing exposures to physical risks such as floods and rising temperature. We've also seen more frequent and severe flooding in states like Sabah and Kedah, and rising heat stress that threatens agriculture and urban livelihood. For any business, ignoring climate risk is not an option. To ignore it is to invite operational disruption, supply chain instability, and potential loss of assets. Integrating climate consideration into your business strategy, on the other hand, means companies can not only mitigate risks, but also identify new opportunities for efficiency, innovation, and value creation. So if you look at this as being a cost of compliance, of course, it's too much. But if you sit back and actually ask yourself, actually, what products do you think people will need the next 10 or 20 years? Then, in a way, you're already starting to innovate. For example, no one seems to be talking about a solar panel running an aircon. You know why? When they say 1.5 horsepower or 2 horsepower aircon, it means it uses about 2,000 watts 1 hour. Now, most of our solar panels don't generate that, so you need a battery system. But it makes me wonder, if you are not in the city and you're outside, where do you go to when it's too hot? In the Middle East, they go to the malls. The malls are expected to look after people when it gets too hot. So where do we go? Surau, temple, church? And do they have air conditioning? So the IPCC reckons that by 2050, we'll need 3 times more air conditioning. Ini tak masuk lagi di data center lagi. So my point to you is, don't look at it as just being cost. You should be looking at your products to think, are they going to be relevant in the next 20 years? So this data disclosure forum is a direct outcome of a feedback and engagement with many of you. And the one key challenge consistently highlighted during the discussions is the need for more complete, credible, and accessible data to provide high-quality, sustainable reporting. So today, this seminar is actually aimed to try and address this. The D2D forum is part of a broader capacity building effort under the PACE initiative. PACE stands for Policy, Assumptions, Calculators, and Education. Because what we realized is that we have no one to copy from, right? Everyone's applying this at the same time. So because of that, we have to do a lot more hand-holding. So are you aware that we've given you 2 illustrative guides as to how to apply it by industry? There's a 3rd guide, which is down in Singapore. Singapore have done one for the real estate. We're planning to do 1 or 2 more. I think the FI industry have decided that because they have more money than me, they're going to do their own. Fine by me. But we're also trying to figure out which other industries may need it. So one thought process we had is, maybe we need one for smaller listed companies. Because in a way, your operations are not so complex. So maybe you do need a guide. But anyway, if you have some ideas or you think there's certain industries that could do with this kind of guide, we're certainly willing to listen to that. So And the nice thing about these guides is it's not just telling you how to disclose or comply with ISSB. It also tries to give you hints that within your industry, what areas should be looking at. So for example, agriculture, you have cows, apparently they burp a lot. That's where your methane source is. So fun fact, you know that if your cows eat seaweed, they burp less? Interesting what you find in the sustainable world. Anyway, so the forum today really is on data. And as I mentioned, that we already know the problem. And I can understand it from the government's point of view because they're collecting the data for their purpose. They never intended it to be shared with the whole world. And of course, if you guys access that data, you want it to be 100% correct. There's no such thing, actually, because it just goes back to your sampling and data. So for example, in Singapore, they showed me something they call version 3. So what the Singaporeans have done is that they have essentially created a digital twin of ASEAN. Do you know that? But they only did it to an accuracy of 8 kilometers. For Singapore, it's at 2 kilometers and better. Now, I thought that's amazing. I didn't know they had done it for us for free. Tapi it's still 8 kilometers. 8 kilometers is still a bit fuzzy. You really want to get it down to 2 kilometers. But it means that there are other data sources out there we may not necessarily know about. I know there's a website, for example, that shows all the high emitters in every state. You can zoom in, Pekan, for example, to find out who are the main emitters. And this is from public data. So in fact, it's a good way to check. Go find out whether your factory is on that website and see whether your number and the number they're quoting are the same. We've taken it down now, but at lobby, you saw this little thing on the side, the KOFA challenge. So the thing which got the NRES minister very excited was we had an interactive display where you can move a dial for sea level rises. And so the minister, Dato' Sri Jogani, said to me, Faiz, when I discuss Rupin and cabinet, boleh tak bawa ni? I said, why? He says, I want to show the cabinet ministers what their kawasan would look like. And actually, even he was a bit surprised because if you assume, okay, like maximum 10 meters, most of the Selangor coastline disappears for at least 4 miles. And he said to me, 30% of our GDP comes from this area. So visually, sometimes the data makes more sense. And as I said, there's stuff that NAHRIM and of course Bursa can provide you, plus other agencies. But we need to think of a mechanism where essentially they give it to you on a best efforts basis. They're not going to guarantee the numbers, right? And the thing about data is historic. It doesn't predict, right? But at least it gives you an idea, roughly what's going on. But you don't need NAHRIM to tell you your area is going to have a flood because you've seen it. It happens so frequently. You don't need them. You already know lah. But I accept that not every area you may have that data. And that's why it's important to understand what are those issues. Now, the other thing that we're told about is getting flood risk maps, emission factors for public transport and land use change, and even consistent utility consumption data for scope 2 and 3 reporting are a problem. So we have started talking to DNB, who have promised that they're moving towards a cloud system that will store all your previous utilities so you can access it. You don't have to go running around hunting for your electricity bills. So those are some of the ideas that we're trying to progress. But again, it's fragmented. Now, I was at a conference last week, Durham, and they were showing me a map of how many people die from heat. So I put up my hand and I said, how many countries in Europe actually have death by heat as a reason for death? And they said 260. 260 cities in Europe have that, but not the whole of Europe. In Malaysia, we don't. I checked. Texas ASU of Ministry of Health, and I say, if you die, is there a line there saying death from heat? No. So obviously, you want to know that data, right? Which areas are vulnerable, who are vulnerable. But if you don't have already now the collection of that data, how are you going to predict that for the future? So that's just to illustrate that although I know you're waiting for this magic ball of data, bear in mind that some of it has not been written yet because we have not set those parameters. And one of the things that we're trying to do with one of the universities in the UK is to understand what data should I be having. I mean, we've asked ISSB and it's Usala. ISSB says they're principle driven. They don't have a list of data. So we're now going out to talk to other countries to say, so actually, what data does your companies use? And I will say one thing. I know you're all looking for this for your accounts now, but I remember 20 years ago, one of my clients in the agriculture business showed me a forward map of where they think water is going to be next 30, 20 years. This is 20 years ago. And as a result, then they already started to move out of Malaysia. Right? So again, it shows the importance of data because it drove their business model. They could recognize that we were going to have problems. They were particularly in the highlands of Malaysia and decided they were going to start shifting their production from Malaysia to another country that they felt was a bit more secure. So already, people are making these decisions based on these data sets. Now, this is the first part of the morning. We'll get Julian from Bursa to explain what is available through Bursa and Sheikh Fikry from NAHRIM. In the second half of the presentations, we'll talk about emissions and supply chain data, two areas that companies find very challenging. And you'll also see a demonstration from Bursa Malaysia of its CSI platform. And from Capital Markets Malaysia, we'll share with you this GHG calculator, which will help you with your emission reporting. And then we'll conclude with a panel discussion with representatives from TNB and SPAN to discuss how some of that data could be used for business purposes. Ultimately, the goal in credibility is to get credibility in sustainability reporting. And that credibility is built on trust. So the ISSB board envisions sustainability disclosures being produced with the same rigor and governance that you would expect from financial disclosure. Now, that's not just a wish. Yesterday, I sat down with two board members from ISSB, the ones who write the standards, and they said, yes, the alignment between ISSB and IFRS is going to get stronger over time. Because they said you already are required under IFRS to understand whether your useful lives of your assets are correct, whether there's any requirement to provide for making good things in the future. So their point is, how can you comply with the IFRS if you don't do ISSB? Because the ISSB is there to make sure that there's some rigor around its estimates and this thinking. So in other words, if your sustainable disclosure says, oh yeah, we're next to the sea, half meter rise, habis. Actually, it's true. If you go to Banting, for example, it's not much more than 1 meter from the sea level. But then in your accounts, you say, oh, useful life, 50 years. Doesn't make sense. And that's what investors are starting to compare. So that's why I had a discussion with some CSOs, Chief Sustainable Officers. I said, the problem is you're scientists. You want to tell everything, but you must remember everything you say will be priced against you. So again, right, that convergence is part of the reason why we decided to choose ISSB. No choice, it's coming. So let me just close by saying that I think all of us, the ACRs are very keen to make sure that help you as much as possible to get across the line. One of the things we realize is that you are going to screw up. You are going to make mistakes. There will be gaps in the first year, right? And so we looked at other regions. Australia apparently has an indemnity. Thou shalt not be sued for 3 years. But it didn't say that the regulator won't whack you. But that's Australia. Even Japan had similar kind of things. And we've raised this in various forums around the world, saying that, when you implement something new, well, I used to be an auditor. First year, always not very good. Why? Because you have no one to copy from. Then the second year, you have things to copy from, and then you improve. It normally doesn't get good to the third year. So we're thinking among ourselves, so how do we send the message that we want you to try your best, but for the first 3 years, we're going to do a light touch. So I don't mind it if you have 2 years of PYA. So be it, because every year you learn something new. But at least try lah. Don't send me letters for exemption. You're not going to get it. Don't catch up my holiday in December. Last minute, appeal. Tak boleh, can group 1, tak payah buat. And I tell you, and I'll just end with this. The reason why I trek up to Durham once a year, and this is the second year I've done it, is that I'm the only regulator in that room. The rest of the room was filled of maybe about 100 scientists. And when you listen to the scientists, you start to sedar that as a professional, we are always doing this balancing act. How to do, but not so hard. How to say something, but you've got to find the resources to do it. How to explain. You've got to read this thing and try to understand it. But when you sit with the scientists, to them it's very black and white. And what they told me, and this was Durham, is that actually we're getting it wrong. It's happening much, much faster than we thought. Because you see, the thing is, there are interdependencies. When one thing fails, something else fails with it. And so they were showing us some of the numbers, which against that prediction 10 years ago, have you heard of the planetary boundary? Apparently 7 out of 9 have been breached. 2 more, and according to them, scientists, it means that planet is not really habitable anymore. So when you sit with scientists, you feel like pissing yourself. Right? It does sound very scary, especially when they start showing up numbers and stuff. There was a section, I have to say, which kept me most, was climate litigation. So they gave an example. In South Africa, an indigenous people believe that when they die, their spirits go into the coral in the sea. So they sued to stop an oil company from putting an oil rig. They won. Because the court recognized that in their country, indigenous rights were supportable. Okay? The ICJ opinion for the islanders concluded that countries can be sued, not just companies, countries can be sued if they are essentially destroying the planet. And I actually met one of the judges in Durham, lady from Italy. And talking to her, I said, but how do you prove the causation? Like normally in court, right? You've got loss, you've got breach, then you got to prove there's a link. She says, in international law, we have determined that you don't need to prove causation because we're relying on reports of the IPCC. Okay? In other words, the judges are saying, we're not clever enough. If the scientists in the form of the IPCC says there's a connection, good enough for me. Okay? Now, I know as corporate guys are probably very shit. Maybe I need to also build up a legal team. Now, that's something we are looking at as regulators, because we want to understand where could this challenge come from. And that's why, as I said, the climate litigation part was part of the reason why I went go there, to understand how far and how fast this is moving. But to my mind, it comes down to this. It just reflects the fact that we all know something is happening. And that happening is happening very fast. As far as we're concerned, we're still focused on emissions. Yes, it would be nice to look at human rights. Yes, it would be nice to look at biodiversity. Yes, it would be nice to look at a lot of things. But ISSB, the choice that we have taken is emissions. So at least help us get some understanding what our emission numbers are like. As an accountant, we always say, you cannot control what you cannot measure. So try lah. And then if you screw up, come write me long letters, minta kesian, and we will look at it in the correct manner. But try, huh? I'm not saying don't try and then come write letters. Have at least a go at it. And as I said, we provided you with many tools to help you do that. So on that note, I would like to thank you all again for coming to the Securities Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, for setting the stage for the forum, for your valuable insights, and highlighting the critical need for reliable and consistent data. Next, we would like to invite Julian Hashim for his presentation on the NSRF and the ISSB standards. Julian is the Chief Regulatory Officer of Bursa Malaysia Berhad. He also chairs Subcommittee 2, Governance and Disclosure of GC3, and is a member of the ACSR. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Julian Hashim.
Morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with today. Good to see many preparers in the room, encouraging signs as well. Now, I think in this session, let's spend the first few minutes to quickly walk through how the sustainability landscape has evolved in Malaysia, and also some of the resources that we have, how companies elevate the quality and the sustainability disclosure while supporting regulatory compliance. Now, the launch of the ISSB in 2023 marked a transformative milestone in global sustainability reporting. Not only did it provide a unified framework for sustainability and climate-related disclosures, it also helped eliminate the fragmented ESG frameworks, GRI, SASB, TCFD, and promote consistency and comparability across jurisdictions and industry. On 24 September 2024, we joined over 35 jurisdictions in adopting the ISSB standards through the National Sustainability Reporting Framework, NSRF. In June this year, Malaysia, I'm proud to say this, was officially acknowledged by IFRS as adopting the ISSB standards with limited transition, making us the only ASEAN jurisdiction to do so. Now, the NSRF will be implemented through a phased approach starting this year, and Scope 3 GHG emission disclosures on a deferred timeline. It addresses the use of IFRS sustainability disclosure standards as the baseline sustainability disclosure standards for companies in Malaysia, as well as the assurance requirements for sustainability reporting. As you can see from this table, the NSRF is shaping Malaysia's sustainability disclosure landscape through a phased and developmental approach. Now, reporting entities are classified into 3 groups, encouraging to see quite a few Group 1 here, but I'm very surprised to see quite a number of Group 3 companies here as well. Now, Group 1 starts in 2025, as you can see from the deck, the slide before you. Now, the 2 groups for main market, and we use market capitalization as a differentiating factor between the 2, and the 3rd group, encouraging to see quite a few of you here, are ACE market and non-listed companies with a revenue of 2 billion ringgit. I also like to highlight on this slide that to support a smooth transition, the NSRF extends certain additional transitional reliefs, including climate first reporting and deferred scope 3 GHG emissions disclosures. This approach recognizes the varying levels and maturity in sustainability practices and reporting across Malaysian companies. Now, hence, the NSRF extends these ATRs, these additional transitional reliefs, for the first 2 reporting periods for Group 1 and 2, and the first 3 reporting periods for Group 3. Now, full details on the application of the ATRs and the proportionality of it is available on the Securities Commission website. As for the Sustainability Assurance Framework, the details will be announced by the end of this year after the analysis from the public consultation is completed. Generally, the aim is for reasonable assurance for Scope 1 and Scope 2 GHG emissions starting 2027 to be provided by accounting and non-accounting practitioners. The NSRF will be implemented through a required legislative and rule amendment using phased and development approach, as I mentioned, supporting the widespread adoption and that continuous improvement in the quality of disclosures. Now, these acts will be the Financial Reporting Act, the Companies Act 2016, the Securities Commission Act, the Capital Markets and Services Act, our own main market and ACE market listing requirements, and the relevant standards issued by Bank Negara Malaysia. This is the illustration on what's required for main market companies. Now, following the launch in December 2024, Bursa Malaysia also enhanced our sustainability reporting requirements for the main market and ACE market to align with the NSRF. Under the enhanced requirements, a listed issuer must prepare its sustainability statement in the annual report in accordance with the IFRS Sustainability Disclosure Standard. Now, in addition, preparing a sustainability statement in accordance with the IFRS Sustainability Disclosure Standards, you must continue to disclose 2 things. Number 1, the metrics and targets of sustainability-related risks and opportunities, and a statement of assurance whether the listed issuer has subjected the sustainability statement to an internal review by an internal auditor or an independent assurance performed in accordance with recognized assurance standards. Now, in this slide and the next, which I'll put on screen shortly, illustrates what listed issuers in different groups need to report in the sustainability statement for each annual reporting period. Now, do access the link at the bottom that you see on the screen before you, or the scan the QR codes to read the requirements in detail. This is the main market illustration. Pause for a few minutes. And this is the ACE market requirements. Also scam alert, the QR codes are not linked to anything. So it's okay. This is just one slide to talk about what the ACSR does. It's an interagency committee chaired by Dato Faiz, and it was developed and supported by the advisory committee on sustainability reporting, and also comprises Bank Negara Malaysia, the Audit Oversight Board, Companies Commission of Malaysia, Financial Reporting Foundation, and Bursa Malaysia. Now, as part of our role to support the adoption of the NSRF, we will identify enablers that will facilitate the use of the standards. We've also formed 3 working groups. The first working group is the Sustainability Assurance Working Group, where we aim to develop a framework for assurance. The second working group is the PACE working group, and PACE stands for Policy Assumptions Calculators Education. And it's a hub to run capacity building and to make available guidance, materials, and tools. And the third working group is the Implementation Working Group to assist in the interpretation, application, and adoption of the NSRF. We'll now dive into the sample of the overview and the ISR that's been developed. Now, one of the key deliverables under PACE are the illustrative sustainability reports, the ISR, for the construction and plantation sectors. The ISR provide practical examples of sustainability disclosures aligned with IFRS S1 and S2 and Bursa Malaysia's listing requirement. Now, each ISR features a fictional company with hypothetical risks and scenarios that may be relevant to both entity and the industry in which entity operates. The report covers 6 key disclosures as shown on the top part of your slide, and the publication also includes Appendix 1, which outlines the transitional reliefs provided under the standards and the listing rules, and Appendix 2, which aids preparers transitioning from a GRI-based reporting to IFRS-aligned disclosures. The QR codes for the construction ISR and the plantation ISR are there. Let's grab that. Now, the plantation ISR illustrates 3 key sustainability-related risks. Now, these risks are those reasonably expected to impact the entity's cash flow, its access to finance over short, medium, and long term. Now, disclosures include risk descriptions, controls and processes to manage risks, as well as the matrix and targets to monitor performance. Now, please note that these are just illustrative examples, and entities may have additional risks and opportunities that require additional disclosures. Let's talk about conducting maturity assessments as set out in an ISR. Now, the ISR outlines a 2-step approach to materiality. The first is identify sustainability-related risks and opportunities that could reasonably affect its prospects. Secondly, assess the omission, misstatement, or obscuring of information that could reasonably be expected influence primary users' expectations such as dividends, interest payments, or share price. Preparers can refer to the IFRS educational materials on material information and the concept of SIA. And coming on to my last slide, now today's forum is aimed to directly address some feedback that we got from all of you. Now, the core aim really is to get your feedback today. It's a two-way process. Okay, please, so let's use our time productively today. And we understand, like Dato Faiz mentioned, it's a recurring challenge across our engagements with industry players from plantation, construction, and financial sectors, the new sector that we're working on in our new ISR. Now, high quality decision useful data is the foundation of meaningful sustainability reporting. And we realize that companies continue to face these hurdles. Scope 3 emission data is often inaccessible and inconsistent. Financial institutions struggle to assess finance emissions. Suppliers in fragmented value chains may lack those reporting capabilities. And the integration of sustainability into financial statements still remains immature, as we saw from the Slido poll earlier today. Now, We trust these curated sessions today will help bridge those data gaps and support that journey from data to disclosure. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Julian, for providing an overview of the NSRF, of the PACE initiatives, as well as an illustration of the requirements for main market and ACE market listed issuers. We would now like to invite Dr. Mohammad Fikry Abdullah, Director of the Corporate Planning Division of NAHRIM, to present on the Hydroclimate Data Analysis Accelerator, or N-HyDAA for short.
Assalamualaikum and very good morning. Thank you to Dr. Faiz, Security Commission, for inviting NAHRIM today, basically on sharing what we have and how basically we can facilitate those PLC in preparing the report. So basically, this is the context of natural disaster in Malaysia. I will give a very brief outline of the natural disaster in Malaysia. So up until today, there is 82 total recorded disaster, and flood is the most prominent event recorded in Malaysia. And from year 2006 up until 2024, there is 6 major events have been recorded that affect not just only citizens, but the business as well. So who is NAHRIM and what we do and how we are related in the climate change? We have been in the context of climate change since 2006. Which is more or less, we are going to celebrate our anniversary for 20 years anniversary next year. So basically, about 19 years experience, 19 years skills, and 19 years of knowledge, we quite good or expert in explaining what is climate change. So based on report AR4, IPCC AR4, what we did was those data we come up with Hydroclimate Data Analysis Accelerator. This is project that was initiated by BIMOS, Masdi, and MDAC back in 2015, where big data was booming that year. So we were one of the agencies that pioneering that project. So in 2015, we do the proof of concept. 2016, we full develop the N-HyDAA. Up until 2014 and 2025, we do the system editing more or less on the interface. So this is our latest interface of N-HyDAA. Basically, it is accessible, but it's still under maintenance. So you guys are free to access this and free to use it. But if you have any problem, by all means, please contact me. Okay, so the objective of N-HyDAA basically is through strengthening climate change mitigation, adaptation by decision maker and stakeholders. We visualize, identify, detect, and trace water-related and disaster risks using 1,450 simulation years up until 1999, basically about 100 years of data. And we try to resolve uncover hidden pattern, unknown correlation, and projection for trend of future hydroclimate. This will enhance risk management, technology, and engineering practices. So how N-HyDAA can help your organization? Basically, it enables climate scenario analysis. We provide evidence-based decision. We use the data as our evidence. We improve response time and risk assessment. We help you. Basically, we not help you. We some sort like give you the idea how you can strategize your planning and support policy infrastructure planning and enhance collaboration. Bear in mind that even though we are a government agency, we also provide some sort like services in terms of conducting analysis and data collection as well. So this is N-HyDAA. We have 6 kilometer times 6 kilometer grid of data comprised of 3,888 grids covering Semenanjung and Sabah and Sarawak. 90 years of projection data up until year 2099, and there are 10 billion hydroclimate data. 10 billion hydroclimate data referring to AR4. We have AR5 coming soon, AR6. When we all tot up together, we are about 30 billion of data. So you can imagine how big our data and how big and how useful we are to you. I'm not trying to make a business, but we are trying to help you, like what Dato Faiz say. So this is the models that we have currently: rainfall and runoff, drought and temperature, stream flow, storm center, climate change factor, water stress index, and water simulation index simulation. This is the module that we developed for the purpose of our research. Okay, so you might don't understand how to use the data and how to optimize the utilization of data. But what we can do is you can use our data to incorporate in your report, do your analysis, do your simulation, but at the same time, tailored with what the requirement from the Bursa Malaysia. This is the module that currently we have, more or less the same, but we put new features of flood map for NC4, report for United Nations UNFCCC, and we also have water yield different, water demand, water provision, water supply deficit, water supply index, and what alternative water resources. Those modules are available, but I'm not sure what is your requirement for your report, but this is the data that available that you can use for your purpose. So this is the features. We have AR4, AR5. You can choose your data type. Coming soon, AR6. We are processing the AR6 right now. So when you, for example, when you choose AR4, there is about more than 20 climate model that you can choose. So this is where NAHRIM can play parts in your reporting. Okay, whether you want to use RCP 2.5, 6.0, 8.5, or 4.5, you might be mistaken. That one is under AR4 and AR5. For ARC, we have SSB, I'm not mistaken. So those are the data that coming soon. Okay. So if you want the model, the data yearly, monthly, or weekly, we provide that kind of data. And if you want monthly, we have range for 1 month, 3 months, 3 months, 2 months, and 6 months as well. I would like to give a teaser of our data. This is our data for year 2006 next year. If you can see, this is the first quarter of rainfall pattern for next year. Okay, first quarter, picture number 1 and 2, and the second quarter is on the right side. So you can see the rainfall pattern in Malaysia for next year. The bottom one is the fourth quarter of rainfall pattern in Malaysia. So you can see the difference. So this is how you can use our data. For example, I will give the simplest example. Let's say you have asset on, for example, what I did last year was hotel and Airbnb located in Kedah. We overlay with rainfall in rainfall volume. So we know which hotel and Airbnb are affected for the next 20 and 30 years. So why we did that? Because we expect that if those tourism industry are affected by drought, they know when to collect the data for rainwater harvesting system. That's how we try to help those industry. Okay, so this is the teaser. Okay, I know some of you will busy keep calling me after this, and Dato Faiz already said, yeah, you need, if you need our help, yeah, come and we will help you with the AG. It's okay. So this is the second interface for temperature for year 2020 up until 2020. You can see the difference. So basically, this is what we are trying to help you. We can help you in how you can analyze the data. Okay. So this is the functionality and features. We try to detect, identify visual and trace possible future rainfall trend, distribution, and magnitude. So with that kind of volume, with that kind of rainfall volume, you might know what are the strategies that you can do. So here is where NAHRIM can help you. Okay. Okay, this is my final slide because I told SC I will open for short Q&A session. You can visit this link. Sorry. Since this is still under maintenance, if let's say if we cannot automate the process, we still need 1 or 2 days business day for approval. And we still need 3 to 5 days for request data. I told SC, P and her team that it is impossible for us to give you all the data set because of why there is no significant for you analysis to do analysis for the whole state of Malaysia and Sabah and Sarawak. Is that correct? If you give this data set to all those big firm company, do the analysis, I'm not sure how much it will cost you, but what you can do is my advice, our recommendation is identify those locations that really affect your business. Okay, from there, get the location, contact us, tell us which data set that you need, whether RCP 2.5, 4.0, 6.0, or 8.5, tell us and we do the extraction for you. Okay? For the analysis part, if you need our help to come up with the analysis, we can help you, but with a charge. We not, like I say, we are not competing with those big firms, but we try to take some portion from those reports, specifically on the climate scenario analysis for that particular part only. Okay? So this is how NAHRIM can do. Today with me, I have Encik Nur Hisham, Head of Climate Change from our Water Resources and Climate Change. He is the leader of my unit in NAHRIM. So apart from me, he is the one that you need to contact. So that's all my presentation. I will open for Q&A session, but I try my best as possible to answer. But if you ask on the technicality of the climate change, I will pass to Hisham. Is that okay, Dato?
Thank you, Dr. Fikry. We will now have about 5 minutes for a short Q&A session. I think we can maybe answer 1 or 2 questions. There is a QR on the screen that participants may scan. So we actually already have 1 question from one of the participants. The question is, can NAHRIM'S climate data be integrated into climate software like ArcGIS, ARCGIS? Also, for the projection, what scenarios does NAHRIM use?
We have data in spatial format, so you can integrate with any spatial ArcGIS, anything. You can integrate with your current software tools. Regarding the climate projection, it depends on which AR you're using, AR4, AR5, we have everything on there. So that's why I'm telling you, we have all those set of data. It's just that what are your requirements and location. Next question.
We have a few more questions, but I think maybe not so relevant for Dr. Fikry. Another question is on the data accessibility. Is it free of charge on the NAHRIM website?
Okay, frankly speaking, I am not in position to tell whether it is free or not because there is no clear mandate or punca kuasa because right now NAHRIM is under Petra, under Yang Ahmad Berhormat, Dato' Ahmad Diraj, Dato' Ahmad TPM, Dato' Fadilah. Previously we under YB Nazmi and now Dato' Jo. So you understand what I'm trying to say, right? There is there is a different ministry but then coming from the research institute, we do understand we have a common objective, we have a common mission. But on the ministerial level, I think maybe like Dato' Faiz said, if we need his help, then maybe we approach Dato' Faiz. But as of now, okay, I'm telling you, if you going to use our data, there is a few clients inside this building that use our data. I have been told that TMB is here. So TMB is one of our clients, if I may say so. There is a few clients coming soon, one telco company, inshallah, next year. InsyaAllah juga one of the FI banking system bank, we are going to have collaboration with them. The reason why we do this, because I think from my personal opinion, they have a very specific requirement. That's why they approach us specifically. Okay? So that come with a cost. Okay.
Okay, maybe one final question. Is the climate data bias corrected with past records and integrated with the digital elevation model?
Encik Syam kata yes, dia angguk kepala. So yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fikry.
Thank you.
So we've heard from Dr. Fikry on how NAHRIM may assist companies in accessing local climate water-related data. Next, we'll hear from Farhana Jabir to present an overview of disclosure requirements under the ISSB and how to conduct a climate scenario analysis. Farhana is a director in the Sustainability and Climate Change practice in PwC Malaysia. He has over 15 years of experience in this space. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Farhana Jabir.
Hi, Assalamualaikum and a very good morning for everyone here. And before everyone think I'm also a climate scientist, I have to make a disclaimer. My background is on accountancy. I was an auditor for many years before move towards sustainability, and where I feel a lot of strength coming from accountants as well as those that are very familiar with reporting is how we can actually take climate information that are very scientific and how to then translate it to a more understandable information that's directly linked to financial impact, for example. So what I'm going to share today, we are also doing climate scenario analysis like NAHRIM, which is funny because I have to tell this story. My dad, before he retired, was from NAHRIM. I think people from NAHRIM knows about it. So taking over in a way what my dad was doing, which is it's coming to a full circle, I would say. So what exactly is climate scenario analysis when we look into the lens of the IFRS Sustainability Disclosure Standard? And the thing that we need to remember is at the end of the day, what Dato Faiz mentioned, it's the standard itself is to communicate what exactly is sustainability risk and opportunity facing the organization. And when you manage risk and such thing as climate risk where nothing is certain, you would want to understand the resilience if climate direction move in a certain way. And if you look at climate risk, we always talk about high transition risk. We always talk about high physical risk. And as an organization, you can't afford to look at it. I think this is where the direction is going to be. And we just head on it. And it's a risk management process where you define a certain range of scenarios. So now we are in October, right? So now is the season where we actually look into coming up with our budget, coming up with our long-term business plan. And in my experience right now, where a lot of our discussion is that in the upcoming year business plan, what kind of climate scenario that we expect? How does this scenario will look like? And if the scenario move into a certain direction, how would it be impacting the organization? Because one of the critical disclosure that ISSB standard asks is resilience of the organization when it comes to addressing climate risk. So I have a few slides later that explain what exactly does this means. But I want everyone here to really understand that we are not here to address the disclosure itself. Where I'm coming from is that we need to address this risk and how we can do it much more effectively. And disclosure is one of the good tools to actually put into the rigor and the exercise and the governance in how we manage. Now, scenario analysis is a crystal ball. We are not here to predict what will happen. So like what I mentioned, it's really a set of projection of possibilities. Are we looking at the world where there will be a high transition risk, or are we looking at a world where there will be a high physical risk? And one good example to explain transition risk can also move in a different direction. And we know carbon tax is coming in 2026. we do know roughly what our neighbors are doing in implementation of carbon tax, but do we know here in Malaysia what's the pricing is going to be? And depending on how the government wants to address it, it can be $200 per ton CO2, or it could be $50 per ton CO2. We do not know. And as part of doing climate scenario analysis, one of the discussions we do have when there's uncertainty like this, where do we think the carbon tax prices could be like? That so when it comes to a high transition risk, that means we foresee the carbon tax prices fairly high. When it comes to low transition risk, that means a high physical risk, we foresee that carbon tax will be fairly low. And that also looks into what do we expect the Rang Undang-Undang climate change bill is going to be like in 2026. What do we expect behaviors of geopolitical risks around the world as well that could have an impact on how we address climate risk. Okay. So how in practice we actually did it. So what my team has done this very well is that we come up with something like a 6-step approach. And the first thing that we all have to acknowledge is really what exactly is the risk and opportunity. And that means sitting down in a group, in an organization with a group of people from risk, from operation, from sales even, to understand which areas within the organization that would be impacted by climate risk. And sometimes, because of the absence of data, this is done qualitatively. And hand on heart, you would know your operation. I think my operation in certain island will be more impacted. Maybe in PNG, I will have less water, Papua New Guinea, not Penang. I will have less water, for example. And this discussion would then drive where we want to do climate scenario analysis. And I think Narim was right in a way, there's no way that we can do a horizon scanning across the whole of Malaysia. So a very targeted approach, where the risk is, where would it be coming from, and which part of our business would be impacted. And then from there, we will start to define the climate scenarios, doing a qualitative and quantitative analysis, run the model, and last but not least, you have all this information moving forward. It will be in the form of financial data and a form of climate data. How do we then embed it as part of the organization, as part of your enterprise risk management framework? I will have a few slides, don't worry, I will go through one by one. What does it mean? Because I think it's very important for us to be able to break it down the process, because everyone always are very scared when it comes to climate scenario analysis. We think it's a very difficult process, but there's always a lot of approach that we do and how we can tailor it to maturity of the reporters, and that also allow under the ISSB standard itself. And we have, I think Julian has mentioned just now that ACSR has issued this illustrative sustainability report for both the plantation and construction sector. And what I've done in the subsequent slide is pull out example from the plantation sector, because I think this is where a lot of data are available, a lot of studies can be done, and how climate scenario analysis can be done for the plantation sector. I'm also mindful that there's quite a lot of manufacturing sector in this room. I'll try as much as possible to give example that you can relate to, but bear in mind, it doesn't matter what industry you are in, as long as you're able to replicate the process, this is something that you can also So the first part, when we look into climate scenario analysis, is let's acknowledge what exactly is the risk that are facing organization. And this is exactly something that I've pulled out from the illustrative sustainability report. And the one that I'm going to illustrate today is on the first part, which is weather event for the plantation sector. And it's not only affecting plantation, construction sector will also be facing this, where we start to see that there is irregular weather pattern. We are now in La Nina phenomenon, where it will be keep on raining and raining over the next few months, right? So you get into a position where as a plantation sector, you are locked in for 25 years here in Malaysia or in Indonesia, and every few years that it either gets too wet, it rains too much, or it gets too hot that you did not get enough water from your operation. So imagine human being when it gets too rainy and it gets too hot, we get fever all the time. And the same thing with any living being. So think about the trees, think about the yield that it produces. And when the weather patterns get inconsistent, and then you start to get inconsistent yield, and how then do we translate it to a financial impact? So that means my income will fluctuate. That means I need to be able to weather the storm over the good years and the bad years, and how then you do. So what you are effectively doing when you do climate scenario analysis for weather events is try to understand how would the rainfall as well as drought over the remaining life of your plantation cycle would be impacting your yield. So obviously you would have data, historical data, that if the temperature increase in a certain amount, the yield would be affected by that. And what theoretically you can do is overlay those future data. And this is something where people like NAHRIM, people like Intensel would be able to provide of what's the expected temperature, what's the expected weather event is going to be like in the future. So if I would just take the first example, which is weather event, and start to think about how do we do climate scenario analysis. So there are 3 guidances out there. These are the ones that's quite popular in the market. The first one you heard again and again this morning, which is IPAR6. This is the latest one. I think it was issued in, if I'm not mistaken, either 2023 or is it 2024. This is the latest available climate information that we have. And what you see in this very thick book is information about where they foresee climate mitigation action will be like, what they foresee government action is going to be like, and what kind of scenarios that you expect to see in terms of climate behavior. And this is actually quite generic, can be used quite across industries. So it doesn't matter what you are, manufacturing, if you are telco, or if you are plantation, you can use IPCC AR6 as a base in setting your climate scenario. And then number 2, we have the IEA Global Energy and Climate Model, and this is very skewed toward energy companies as well as oil and gas. So it really pushed towards about oil production, gas demand, etc. And then last but not least, NGFS scenarios for central bank and supervisors. So the FIs in the room will be very familiar for this. This is where FIs foresee what are the climate strategy of investment in terms of lending will be like in the future. So the first step is really pick something that will be relevant for your organization, and we foresee a lot of us will be focusing on IPCC AR6. Now, how IPCC AR6 then define climate? So they come up with a few scenarios. I mentioned before, there are those with a higher physical risk, and then there are those with a much lower transition risk, because we do not know, we don't have a crystal ball. No one can predict the future. If I can, I wouldn't be here. I would be making so much money. Okay, so in a lot of circumstances, a lot of organizations currently foresee that it is SSP2, where the temperature is expected to rise at about 2.7 degrees Celsius by 2100. And what does this mean for you in managing your operation, and especially when you start to build your financial planning over the next few years? So in practice, what we do is we make sure that this assumption, this expected climate behavior is embedded as part of your budget process. So if we expect certain area based on SS2 under AR6 would be flooded. So that means you will start to implement certain mitigating action. You will start to embed certain capex that you want to do, and that should be part of your business planning. And obviously, accountants in the room who say that no, we can't only have one scenario. We need to consider multiple scenario in how we assess. So then, as part of the assessment and as part of the planning, this standard requires you to actually do additional one climate scenario analysis. And that means looking at, if it's not SSP2, what do we foresee the behavior could happen? And in a lot of cases, of course, we try to do a stress test based on a worst case scenario of high physical risk and another worst case scenario of a high transition risk. And based on that, that's when you start understanding if it behaves this way, can my asset withhold, am I resilient or not? What's the impact to the financial statement at the end? Okay, what my team also has done is to look into a few plantation companies in Malaysia and Singapore with assets throughout Malaysia, Singapore, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, etc. So you can start to see not a lot of them has publicly disclosed climate scenario analysis data, and that this is understandable because it's new and some of them might not be comfortable to disclose something that they are very sure of, but you can see a lot of scenarios chosen are SSP2, SSP5, as well as the net zero emission by 2050. So as and when you are trying to do climate scenario analysis, we do this quite a lot where we benchmark peers and we want to understand where exactly do they foresee climate behavior will be like. And in a lot of cases, SSP2 is where they actually define their baseline. And in the ISSB standard, this definition needs to be made very clear and disclosed as part of the reporting. So now you have set the scene. And once you set the scene, you will already have an idea which area of your business would be impacted. And there's two ways that you can do climate scenario analysis. And the most important part is the qualitative aspect. It's a lot of sitting down and studying and understanding the business and identifying an impact where it could have an impact to the business. So the first part I mentioned about weather patterns, weather are inconsistent, and because weather are inconsistent, the yields get fluctuated by quite a lot. And when your yield get fluctuated by quite a lot, the direct business impact is that your revenue will get lower and then has an impact to the net profit. So I know it sounds very technical, but it sounds very easy, frankly, sometimes. But when you actually sit down with multiple people in the business, you actually need to really understand the key drivers, where in the business it will be impacted, and what's the financial impact. And this process is very important because then when you want to start quantifying the impact, this is where we actually go back and start the quantification. So in a lot of my experience, the sustainability team and the operation team will spend quite a lot in discussing this. But when they want to quantify, this is where the finance team in the room might find it very useful because they can see the driver, see where it comes in, and then they can pull out the information from the financial. So this is a exercise that we do, and in a lot of time, it takes us about 2 weeks to 1 month to actually do for a group 1 size companies here in Malaysia. And the interesting thing about impact, something that I want to remind everyone here, not necessarily it could be a bad impact. It could also be a positive impact. So certain demands on certain services and products might go up. And then what are the key drivers from that and how then it has an impact. Okay. So we have actually do something similar where we look at the heat map in Malaysia and try to understand where could assets be affected. Okay, maybe I'll go back from here first. Once we do this, you roughly know the location and the business that will be affected. So then we are very clear on where we can actually dive and analyze it. because, and I will be very frank here, climate data are not cheap. Climate data are not easy. Nahrim is laughing. It's not cheap. Okay, you have to pay certain assets for like $500 per climate data in some cases, right? So we are not going to do full horizon scanning. So understanding where the asset will be affected, how often and most likely it will be, and then only then we deep dive into the specific area, specific segment, understanding how it will be affected. So what do we look at? We look at, for example, weather patterns. We look at flooding risk arising from coastal area. We look at flooding risk coming from rivers. We look at the number of assets that would be affected. So once you do this overlay to your asset map, you start to pick up, oh, I have certain plantations here, I have certain mills here, I have certain items here. Let's pull out my fixed asset register, list it down, and understand where the locations are. And from there, this is where it gets very nerdy, is that we start to quantify the financial impact. So for example, you know that plantation number 23 and number 24 would be affected. Then we will pull out all your business projection, all your impairment assessment that you have done, and does that assumption for that particular location still stand based on the baseline scenario that you have identified, as well as remember we talked about the two climate that you want to run. Based on that, is this asset still resilient? And in some cases, in a lot of the discussion that I had with my client, a lot of them will say, Farhana, there's no impairment, don't worry. Okay. But in a lot of it, okay, but does your headroom from a big size now getting smaller and smaller? So we try to understand that behavior well. Another real life issues that we have, because if you look at it, the first leg of this formula, it's not cast in stone. A lot of time we pick the formula. First is changes in risk exposure. This is where we do quite a lot of climate data study. Understanding the mitigation action that you're going to do and how much you're going to spend. And we spend quite a lot of time discussing about must they disclose this capex that they will now need to spend to actually mitigate this climate action. And if I were to go into what's the standard actually requires, the answer is yes, that you have to disclose how much you are spending in terms of mitigating action. So now my days are now filled trying to quantify the impact, trying to understand, is it something that relevant? How would then this be impacting your disclosure? So a lot of the discussion is less about quantifying. That's the first hurdle that we need to hit. But the second part of the discussion is that once you disclose these numbers, and now you look at your peers here that also will be disclosing these numbers for the first time, how would then stakeholders would read this and assess your performance when it comes to climate mitigation? So there's a lot of process that needs to be done, not just the quantifying aspect, but also planning for how this to. And if in the slide right now, what I'm showing is example, you can see this in the illustrative sustainability report, how these numbers will be disclosed. So we talk about the scenario that you have defined in the second step. And the next step, we talk about how will this look like to your business in the short term, in the medium term, in the long term, and what's the impact in terms of financial. So you see in the first short term, we are saying that you have 2 to 4 million impact. In the medium term, 7 to 13 million impact. And in the long term, because of the data that might not be available, you might need to take an exemption under the standard and see that this is something that can't be quantified. Now, this is what I call the gold standard. Do we, foresee a lot of organizations will be able to produce this kind of exposure? Perhaps not, but this is where, where we need to try to achieve. And how then we embed this consideration as part of your business planning. So So that means when you start to do climate scenario analysis, it's not just the sustainability team and the finance team. The strategy team will now needs to be part of the discussion. Is that aligned with how you foresee your business? And your risk team now will need to look in to be part of the discussion when you risk horizon. Do you foresee that this climate behavior would change? And we need to start tracking these potential key levers when it comes to climate risk. Okay. So this is one of the last part of my presentation, is that at the end of the day, data is as good as how you actually use it. And what we also try to push a lot is that once this information are available, it is actually very, very useful. And we should use this information as part of how we manage the organization. So remember, traditionally, we always have this first line of defense, second line of defense, and third line of defense. And how do we use this process to actually now manage climate risk? So not only is sustainability team's responsibility, but it's really the whole organization that will now need to start embedding this process as part of their operation. So I'm going to close my presentation in terms of sharing what are the challenges that I see when we have a lot of our clients in terms of performing climate scenario analysis. The first one is really upskilling, understanding what is it about. But the soft areas, what we start to notice is that you need a team that can actually provide linkages between operation, risk, strategy, and finance. And without that, it's going to be very difficult to actually even make sense in terms of some of this information. And the second part moving forward is that once you start collecting this information, we need to keep on doing this continuously, and it has to be an ongoing process. So that means what kind of process in place that we have, what kind of SOP that we have in place, how often do we need to report, and what kind of, if something goes wrong, how do we escalate this to the right level? So a lot of this needs to be formalized. And last but not least, data. I always tell my client, don't install the system until you're very sure what data that you want to actually collect, because it really depends on your own business needs. But it's very important now is to start collecting a lot of this historical data that traditionally we did not collect. So the plantation boys are very used to collecting climate data. But for others in the room, now we are talking about in my GL, I need to have another line and another column that I can put out that these are spending for climate. And when I issue PO, I need to know this PO, is it for climate mitigation? Is it for nature? Is it for social? So a lot of this week now needs to happen as and when our reporting gets mature. Do I foresee that you need to do all three? So I think it's very important that we do 2 out of 3 best. And as and when you get more mature, you have all these processes in place, that's when you start putting in some of these best practices that we foresee we need to have in the market forward. Okay, so that's all from my presentation today.
Thank you, Farhana, for your very engaging presentation. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, we would have to skip the Q&A, but thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, sure, Farhana, sorry. Apologies, if you can come back to the stage, please. So we have received questions actually during your session. So one question is, what are the best practices for time allocation and scenario analysis? Should we use a time frame of 3 years, 5 years, or until 2050?
Okay. Very good and relevant question. When you first start doing reporting under ISSB standard, this is what I first noticed. You have to define time horizon. And the way you define time horizon, as usual, ISSB said prescriptive okay, based on your own business, based on how you manage your operation. So we had quite a lot of discussion. What's the definition? I would say don't stray too far from how you manage your business. But at the same time, do benchmark with peers, because I'm in one of a position where long term is like 3 years, which doesn't make sense, right? So for example, plantation, you would foresee long term would be up until 25 years to complete your replanting cycle. Certain manufacturing industry, sometimes you have a long-term lease on certain asset, you might need to expand it. So there's no right definition in terms of that, but as part of the process, define your time horizon and make sure it's consistent with your business. And then when you do climate scenario analysis, you follow that time horizon. And in a lot of data that we see, the time horizon are actually quite long, until 2100. So most of the time it covers substantial part of your business.
Perhaps one last question. So in the principle of financial materiality, the integration of scenario analysis for risk and impact identification, could I understand what's your approach to translating, for example, increase in rainfall over the medium term to direct financial impacts for companies?
There's few ways to do it. Okay, so for example, increase in rainfall for plantation, there's two impacts. The first one is your direct revenue yield impact, direct hit, right? But in a lot of our conversation with a lot of clients, no one is not doing anything. And I think everyone in this room is doing something. And sometimes a lot of the challenges is really, guys, need to sit down and pull in all of these actions that you have been doing, either, unconsciously or consciously, to actually address climate risk. And I give one example is that, you have been investing in ban, to parade and all that, right? So put out those costs, okay? And then we start to see that because the rain gets so often, Farhana, my maintenance cost for all the roads gets higher and higher. Okay, we have to put out all those costs. So a lot of it is to really, there's a revenue element, there's also the cost element, then there's also the capex element that we need to put in. So don't forget that. And interestingly, it's not just cost, and a lot of it are investment, not in terms of capex, but also in terms of research and development. So you start to see a lot of these plantation players say, I'm doing research, I want to come up with a seed that at the end of the day will never need water, which I think is a bit, bit impossible, but that is the investment that they're trying to make. So how do they make that yield, that seedling more resistant to climate? So that's also an additional financial impact. So what we are trying to do as part of reporters is that trying to understand how much at net cost would this be? Which of these information something that your stakeholders are very interested in? Some are very interested to hear about your R&D. Some are very interested to hear about your current cost. So different companies will have a different focus. So you need to understand that and provide that.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Farhana Jabir for her presentation. Now we will do a short engagement session / Q&A with Chairman Dato Faiz. Could I invite please Chairman Dato Faiz back to the stage? Round of applause, please, everyone. So this would be your opportunity to provide feedback or ask any questions to the chairman. We have running mics around. So if anyone has any questions, please raise your hands.
Right, thanks, Farhana. Now, this is not planned, but because I have to go off and sort of another problem, I thought I might as well hear from you. Now, as I say, we have an idea of what we think we need. And that's why a lot of it has already been this illustrative, looking at how we're going to whack you, stuff like that. But what else, right? Because certainly for the first 131 of you, you'll be reporting the end of this year. And I assume that you guys are ready now. Because many of you, no, jokes aside, because many of you already sit in other jurisdictions where it's mandatory. or there's already some form of reporting. In fact, what Bursa has been doing proactively is to prepare you. Even the banks, you think you have it hard. Bank Negara is pushing the banks to report a lot more. But I feel sorry for the banks because they can't report because you don't report. Right? Because when a bank is asked to report, how risky are your customers? And then they find out you're not reporting anything anyway. How would they know? You see why we had to bring the standard in. Because actually, you are the starting point for everyone to sit back and say, are we ready? And again, I come back to this point. It's not a very popular discussion when I have this with other regulators. But to me, the other thing we also have to balance is, while we're trying to bring emissions down, we have to recognize the heat's not going to, these floods are not going to go away. There will be more water, there will be more drought. And already as business people, have to start thinking, how is your business going to survive in the next 20 years when these things come reality? So it's not a compliance exercise, it's a survival exercise. So, any feedback you want to give me? Can I delay it another 10 years? No, there may not be another 10. And when your businesses start suffering from lack of water, lack of power, I mean, I talked to a port owner. No, don't worry, Faiz, I've got consultants here, we already know what to do. And I said, okay, so when the floods come, how are your employees going to get to your port? Oh, he says, we haven't thought about that. Are you providing Zodiac stations so people can come? And say that there is a thinking, that you only worry about what's in your pagar. Feedback?
See one in the center.
Good morning, Dato. Morning, everyone. I'm just sharing my experience that we have done of ERAs in the past. And we come to a point that right now is okay, we started all these things that we have been advising our clients. Okay, we pump a lot of carbons, okay. Our clients are power plant, steel, aluminum, bitumen, all this. So yeah, back in the old days that we've been trying to say that this is real. Hydraulic, flooding, heat. But those are not reported in. We come to a point now that this has been exposed. So when come to the money talks, only thing. All right. So the last 10 years I was in the construction sector, pump even more carbons. Okay. So I'm telling you guys that all these things are real. So we have no more, like, let's say 5 or 10 years, because things are getting more and more intense at the moment. I mean, we have tornado 2 days ago, it was reported. And then, yeah, by all means that do something and then just do something, okay? It is really serious because our market is not that big. Malaysia is only like this small, okay? If we are not stand united together into this thing, where are we going to go? Nobody going to come in. Investors going to run away. They're moving out. And then China's going to come in and all these things. Are we actually being resilient? First in the climate and second in the market. How about that? Right? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, to put things in context, and thank you very much for that comment. I sometimes say this openly to my team. Actually, Malaysia is very blessed. When you wander around the regions, we don't have earthquakes like in, okay lah, 1 or 2 in Johor. But, not humongous things like volcanoes erupting. We don't have the typhoons of the Philippines. And when I go and talk to them, it's like an insoluble problem, right? Because as soon as one is over, the next one comes, right? So in that sense, in that context, because we're a blessed country, we've taken it for granted. So that's why I say to you, business community, I know this is hard, but it's not just client. The questions that we're asking you to think about is actually quite fundamental to, are you going to be around in business or not? And you must be in business. If the country does not grow, we'll have problems. So I need the company sector to survive and be resilient. And in fact, it's one of my main arguments when I travel around other parts of the world trying to get them to invest in me. Is actually, as a country, we're very resilient. Every time we have a flood, within 2 days, it's sorted. You go to Pakistan, right? They had a flood 2.5 years ago, still not solved. And I've seen the data. Unemployment, poverty, domestic violence, mental health, all that is in. And that's the bit that scares me. Making the country more resilient. But it starts with you guys. Are your businesses? I don't want to be lecturing you, but you know, if you want to know what's driving us in FC, is because we can see what's going to come. There's a reason why this building looks the way it is. You may not appreciate it, but when this building was built in 1998, it was built with energy conservation in mind. We consume 50% less power than a building of the size would expect. That's because of the atrium light coming in. So this building was built 30 years ago on the premise that we needed to save power. Okay? So we have a history of looking forward. And now I see what's coming next. I'm saying, where are the solar panels? Where's the rainwater harvesting? How do we reduce heat? And also, frankly, working from home. It is now part of our business ethics, our business operational model, because we realize in a crisis, how are you going to get to work? We may have to figure out how to do things, but from home. And I'll tell you, the last COVID crisis, Nurul will remember, we had everyone with computers, we had all the software in PwC, but we forgot that laptops are not expected to run 24/7. And so all the power supplies are built up. We had to get someone that Lala move, ship our units, people at their houses, because the laptop PSUs were all burning up. We didn't expect that. Anyway, sorry, there was a question.
Hello, my name is Adam. I just want to ask you, I mean, I think you mentioned a very good point, right? Even if your assets are not affected, for example, by flood, but if we can't get to our manufacturing site or if we can't get to our customers, then that's most probably an issue, right? But how do we then translate that that incident or that scenario into financial impact that will actually end up in our annual report? Because I think everybody in the room can acknowledge that flood will definitely impact us directly or indirectly, right? But how do we then translate that into our annual report?
So one, of course, is let's take the most common scenario as floods. But so far, based on the historic evidence, a lot of the work we've done on drainage and rivers and all that has been quite successful in the sense that when it passes, when rainstorm passes, we go back to normal. So that transientness is historical, and it would be the basis of the assumption that it should not be a major problem. Now, if you were sitting in Thailand, you have a different problem. Because when you have lots of water coming down and the moon is up and the sea levels are up, you have that perfect storm. Apparently in Malaysia, only happens days here where you have the confluence of the moon. How many times is that? About 4 or 5 times a year? That's the thing you have to be worried about. Because there are certain points in the year, see, most of you don't know this, but that's what happened in Thailand. It was a perfect storm. The sea levels were high. There was lots of rainwater. The rain couldn't go into the sea. And so it backed up and kind of wiped out their manufacturing sector. So those are the things. So it's not a simple answer I can give you, which is, oh, you can assume some things. Yeah, you can. But I think we are lucky here that actually a lot of work has gone into rivers. Make sure it moves faster. I went to Singapore. They have a different philosophy. Whenever it rains very hard, they put it underground. They have huge caverns under Singapore. Similar to Istanbul, similar to Japan, they actually have underground tanks. But in Singapore, they do that to take into account the severity of the rain. And then when it stops raining, they start pumping it out. So it's managed. And you can do that in a city. You can't do that in a country. But those are some of the things that I think they're already thinking about, which is not just the water cleanliness, but how do you store it? So I think it would be valid for you to say in your assumptions that based on the past, there have been no more than 2 days worth of interruptions and that the state has managed it. Selangor State is one of the few that actually has a water plan. And we are sitting down with them to discuss that plan, understand at what point do you need money? Because, I mean, running to government for money, well, even to try and get your SST punya exemption pun kena marah from the minister. Okay, I don't think anyone got an SSD exemption, and that's the reason why lah. So we have to figure out where is the money going to come from to be able to do all these things that the state wants to do. So we're starting with Selangor. In fact, we're having an offsite for the board next week. We're actually bringing the Selangor, the Landasan something, Landasan Lumayan, which is the company that was set up to look at the river. I mean, do you know that 95% of your water in Selangor is from the river? Have you seen what you throw into rivers? I had Tasha telling me, Dana, they threw nappies, sofas, I think they even had a car. Huh? Washing machine. I'll tell you this. I talked to an expert. I said, why is it that we have so much rubbish in our drains? Just plot. When in doubt, throw. He said, when he had a conversation with the Japanese engineers, how can we deal with it? The Japanese couldn't understand this. He said, we don't have this problem in Japan. So I was thinking maybe you have to design different kind of drains, drains which you cannot throw rubbish. Only water can come through. But seriously though, everything I'm hearing about, you keep on hearing about the pools of plastic in the Pacific Ocean. Apparently some of it comes from here. Another thing to be proud of them. They also contribute plastic to this. So, okay, I'm going to stop serializing tea. But is there anything else that I mean, listening to Farhana, I suddenly thought, gee, I wonder how many of you actually know how to apply a methodology. Okay, like if you can afford PwC, fine lah. But what if you can't, right? And so I'm beginning to think, should we get? I mean, to be fair, we should get all the big firms in, and I don't know, maybe run a panel once every month for the next 3 months, just so that you can ask your general questions. I mean, would that be helpful? Because I think for many of you, you kind of roughly know, but you want to just validate. Am I on the right track? What kind of questions should I ask? If you feel that there is such a need for that, I will talk to the big four firm and ask, in terms of CSR, can you help at least guide the industry so they know where to start? What are some of the questions? Or should we organize a series of webinars that you can dial in and listen to? And of course, we record these things so you can watch it. Would that be helpful? Okay. So let us do that, because as I say, my job is to make sure I get you all across the line. But as I say, the bigger picture is it's already here. The problem is already here. And I need to make sure that you guys can still make money, because if you can't, I can't sell the market to outsiders. In fact, I'm off to Tokyo tonight because one of the things they asked, they want all the ASEAN countries to say, what's so good about your country? And I'm going to whack on the resilience, because the guy before me is Philippine. The guy after me is Indonesia. So I'll just say, well, other than durian, your business will still run. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any other bright ideas, please tell my team or send us an email. But I am quite concerned that, that need to be guided. So I can give you these illustrators and all that, but I don't think that will solve the problem. So give me some ideas as to what we can help. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Dr. Faiz. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now go for a short break. Can I please request that everyone be back here by 11:05? By 11:05, so that we can proceed with our remaining sessions for the rest of the day. across the supply chain, the Bursa CSI platform. Please welcome Ms. Wong Hui Yin from Bursa CSI.
Thank you, Najib. Morning, Dr. Faiz, distinguished guests. So today my conversation is on CSI solution. It may not be a topic that is new to some of you, but for some of you, it may be the first time you're hearing. And if you're listed companies, this is a platform you must know, because this will be the designated reporting channel for anything sustainability related pertaining to listing requirements. Okay, so let me get started. So I will cover two things: the CSI core and the value-added services that we have weaved in to ensure better usability, better functionality, and facilitate your reporting a little bit better. Okay, maybe some story before we begin. Notice the picture went up. Okay, never mind. Anyhow, we started this with the intent to better evolve the platform. So it was TCFD as a base before NSRF was crystallized. So after the announcement of NSRF, what we did was very quickly we pivoted and ensured that this platform is purpose-built to ensure that you can use this to address the NSRF requirements. So in March this year, we announced, announced that this will be the reporting channel for all PLCs pertaining to sustainability reporting, and it is right now fully compliant to IFRS S1, S2 requirements. Okay. And this is what the CSI solution looks like. That is, of course, the platform, the system to let you do your disclosure, help you think about what you need to do, know what is missing for you to calculate your emissions. And there's services within. So it's not just a tool to collect data. There's also other services that will help you through your reporting journey. And lastly, we are also trying to piece together, making sure that when you do things, when you do the disclosure, is not just for compliance sake, but for a purpose, right? So we plug in to the ecosystem for the banks. Banks are also using this, but with another lens. Maybe I'll explain it a little bit later. So the outcome is that we wanted a unified disclosure hub for the entire nation, because right now everything is a bit fragmented. So in order for us to consolidate everything, that's why we are centralizing all this, starting with PLCs for reporting. And this is going to be in compliance with, very importantly, IFRS S1, S2. And it is also our gateway to get connected to the ASEAN ecosystem, because a lot of ASEAN exchanges also started their journey, not CSI specifically, they all have their own reporting channel as well. So what we want to do is ensure that when we do this, it can be plugged in and it can be interoperable throughout this ASEAN ecosystem. So we go to the platform itself, the first module, which is the system. So within the system, there are three key modules. The first one is to measure, which is where the carbon calculator sits. The second one is manage. When you say manage, it's actually helping you manage your supply chain. So this is something that is a little bit unique for the CSI. I will spend a little bit of time on this and reporting. So lastly, this is the module where PLCs will use for your IFRS S1, S2 reporting aligned to the NSRF requirement. So very quickly, maybe just to give you a feel of what the platform looks like, so you don't feel so intimidated the first time you log in, right? So you will see three boxes there. So the first box is GHG emissions. So this is your carbon calculator for scope 1 to scope 3. So the scope 1 calculator is, the emissions is based on DEFRA. The scope 2 calculator is, of course, Suruhanjaya Tenaga, and for the non-Malaysian emissions, we are using NAHRIM'S. So, a lot of you are actually using Excel-based spreadsheets or freeware to do your emissions, because I think it's readily available. So what we have right now is we have put it into a tool, tamper-proof. You don't need to worry about the emissions not being outdated, not getting updated with the latest. This is all taken care by the CSI. So you can use this and get and be assured that this is the most updated emissions that's available. And in terms of monitoring, this is also the platform for you to have a view of how you're performing. Have you decarbonized enough? Are you meeting your targets? Because everything will be transformed into a dashboard for you for easy reference and also for you to present to your management. So this is the view screenshot of the emissions calculator itself. The first one is on the left, it's the scope 1. Of course, everything is templatized. What you need to do is just put in your fuel, type of fuel and everything will be converted for you. Okay, so I think it's quite not dissimilar to what you're using, but it's just that it's templatized. Then the second piece is scope 2, which is, of course, your bills and everything. So it's in kilowatt per hour. So you just need to choose the location that you're procuring the electricity from. So it's Peninsula, they'll use the proper emissions. If it's Sabah, Sarawak, accordingly. And if it's overseas, just name the country, they'll use NAHRIM'S to convert for you. So everything taken care. Okay, scope 3. So this is something that is a little bit unique. So there are all 15 categories that you need to comply to. Of course, the guiding principle is that we start off with the commute and business travels. But of course, NSRF is dictating that you do all 15. So get started with the CSI. What it does is that it offers you a very granular view of how your suppliers are contributing to your emissions. Okay, maybe let me just articulate this a little bit better in this slide. So this is actually closely tied to the management tool. So the management, is actually managing your supply chain. So what it does is that it will give an estimate of how much emissions your supplier is contributing to your scope 3 by just using a simple spend methodology. So what you need to do is collect, if you have a list of, say, 500 suppliers you're dealing with. So right now, if you're doing a proper scope 3 engagement, you will need to engage with all 500 and get them to disclose whatever that's required for you to calculate your emissions, right? That's the typical way of doing. So what CSI does is that it flips the conversation a little bit. It starts off with estimate on your supplier's emissions. So you don't go to them with a blank sheet of paper asking them, can you give me your emissions? They can choose to ignore you because they say that, hey, it's better for you not to know. No, but then you say, if you don't tell me, I'm going to use the estimates. Do you agree with the estimates? If they don't agree, that's where it's easier to invite them to the table. So that there is a heat map actually. So once you have inputted the required information onto the platform, they will be able to generate a heat map, which is the table on the bottom right. So you'll be able to see the companies or the suppliers that has the highest emissions in the operations. So by doing that, if you have thousands of suppliers, it is quite impossible that you'll be able to invite all thousands to contribute to the data collection exercise. So what you can do instead is that you use this and you identify the key ones. So it could be your top 20 contributing to 80% of your scope 3 emissions. So if that's the case, let's start off with the 20. So it could be a manageable size of maybe 80 to 100, instead of thousands. So it's how it helps you select who you should be engaging with. And of course, the engagement process itself, everything is on the platform. It's not done out of the platform. So it starts off with as simple as emailing the suppliers, inviting them to register an account on the platform. and getting themselves assessed in terms of how matured they are in their sustainability journey. So if they tell you that I'm not ready at all, then you know what are the training you need to send them to, know how to manage them, managing the expectation and managing the timeline. So it offers you that view. So you can monitor the progress in the dashboard format as well. And they themselves, as a supplier, will get the benefit from the tools available because they will have access to the carbon calculator that you have. So no, they don't need to go out of the system to find their own carbon calculator. Okay, so once they have the email sent out to them, this is the first destination that they will land, which is come and tell me how far you are in your sustainability journey. So that's very easy, right? So you get to track. So if you have engaged 100 suppliers, then you know, are all 100 they ready to start disclosing, or do you need to offer more help to them? So that's your starting point. So we work with PwC to develop this maturity assessment. And within that, once you have done that, identify what level you are, then you invite them to the training. And we ourselves also have invested in this by offering a free GHG training for your suppliers so they can benefit from it. So that is on calculation part, which is your scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. So once you have calculated and then you have engaged, so the last piece is where you do your disclosure, right? So disclosure is mapped to, again, NSRF says is IFRS S1, S2. So all this has been unpacked in a structured manner that you will be easy for you to disclose. So right now, if I were to ask any one of you, get started on doing the disclosure as per what NSRF is prescribed. So what you need to do is start off, okay, where am I? I live through the guidebook, the TIC guidebook, and I see where am I, right? For those who have not gotten started, I think even some big main market companies that's in batch 2, group 2, I think some of them have not started. So this is a very daunting process. So instead what we did is that we unpacked the big guidebook into a list of questions. So it is to guide you so that you know what is important and you know what are the gaps that you have just by looking at the questionnaires. So it can be as easy as a yes, no answer, and then it gets you thinking, right? So if I do not have this, what do I need to do next? No, if I have this, is it sufficient? Because it's a probing question it will ask. So the more you answer, the more you know how far are you in your journey. Are you already addressing it, or are you halfway there, or are you not quite there? So this is how you're guided to ensure that there is a way to facilitate your reporting a little bit more better rather than to live through all the guidebook. And all the guidelines that is prescribed in the document, in the IFRS S1 and S2 document, is also listed on the right side of the template. So instead of you going back and referencing the document from scratch, it just refers for this question, this is to address this particular guideline. Also, it's easy. It simplifies the process very much. Okay, and also there are some companies who are not only doing locally, right? Because you're doing business overseas, there's other standards that your clients may ask of you, may be required to address. So all the questions and everything is also mapped to the other standards. You can see the GRI, the TCFD, which is subsumed under ISSB, and also some of the global European standards. So you can see it's tagged to the questions. Okay, so that was on CSI, the platform itself. So that is the tool that you'll be required to use for your NSR reporting. Okay, so but we know that the CSI cannot be everything to everybody. So we know that there are certain pockets of opportunity where there's other service providers can potentially come in to also complement the CSI. So we started the journey by going to the market and seeing, what are the other services, digital solutions that can be weaved into the CSI to make your reporting journey a little bit better, a little bit more elegant. So we currently have 2 AI partners that I think we've announced in the market as well. It's MDEC-backed smallish fintech companies, local. So this local guys, what they've done is that they've looked to what CSI have, and they've come back to us with some proposition on how can they potentially complement what we are doing. So using AI, what they've done is that they have actually prepared some gap analysis. If you are using CSI, they can use the CSI, your disclosure, to see how far are you from fulfilling that full 100% compliance. Or if you have existing reports, they can also use that to generate a gap analysis on where you are. Okay, so that's one of the propositions. They also have another product, which is something that gets people pretty excited, which is using CSI, whatever questions you have gone through, they can use Gen AI to prepare a base sustainability report for you. Also, it allows your copywriter to do things a bit faster. So instead of them spending like maybe 2 to 3 weeks to refine that edits, it starts off with a good base that is potentially already 80+% ready. So you just need to put in the last mile to ensure that it is good to go. So that's the 2 tools. The other one is Sustainix. So you know that we have a FTSE for Good ESG ratings that is we roll out to the market. So this is an AI tool, not specifically linked to the CSI, but it helps you with reporting so they can improve your ratings. Okay. So very quickly, just let me sum up what I presented. So CSI solution, the top part, the sustainability reporting platform, that is the part that you all will be using. This is completely complimentary, no cost to you. Okay, so this is a mandatory tool. It will be rolled out in stages. We are prioritizing group 1 companies first, and those companies that have this December financial year end know that they want to use this for their ESG performance table reporting. Okay, the rest, the bottom ones, are the value added services. The CSI, the scope 3 calculator is something that will attract a small fee, but it's not something that is too far out, but something that you can consider. So again, the first one, it's for you to use. We will roll out in stages, but if you have an interest to look at the full-fledged solution, you can potentially also get early access to the reporting module. Okay, and this is, if you have any questions, please go to our website. There's a microsite there to describe what I just presented, and also capture the CSI email the team. We will get back to you if there's any questions. Okay.
Thank you, Julian, for providing us with a comprehensive overview of the CSI platform and solution. The next session will demonstrate use of the SEDG GHG emissions calculator. The calculator was developed by Capital Markets Malaysia, an affiliate of SC. But to conduct this presentation, we have Navina Balasingam, General Manager of Capital Markets Malaysia, and joining her as well is Akhilan Manivannan, a consultant of Lasaju. Please join me in first welcoming Navina to the stage.
Thank you. Thanks, Najib. Hi, good morning, everyone. So I'm going to talk today about the GHG emissions calculator that was launched by Capital Markets Malaysia. As Najib mentioned, we are an affiliate of the Securities Commission. But before I go into the calculator, a little bit of background on the Simplified ESG Disclosure Guide, which was the precursor to why we built the GHG emissions calculator for SMEs. So I think some of you in the audience may be familiar with the SEDG. We launched it in October 2023, specifically to help SMEs in supply chains to be able to report on ESG data. So, and the reason that we did this is we had been working with a group of listed companies that had started to set their net zero targets and needed to get credible scope 3 data. And this was really difficult to get from SMEs because SMEs, as we know, don't have a chief sustainability officer or any sort of sustainability team there to, get credible emissions data. So we wanted to come up with something that was simple and easy for SMEs to use. So So we came up with this guidance. It is a voluntary guidance, so it's not mandatory for SMEs to report, but it curates the data and disclosure requirements from not just Malaysian requirements of Bursa Malaysia, but also ISSB, the GHG protocol, and other disclosure guides to make sure that SMEs in Malaysia, whether they are supplying to local customers or international customers, have the comfort that they are disclosing on the same data that their international counterparts will be doing as well. Thank you. So this year, the SEDG has had quite a lot of traction. I'll show you in my next slide the adopter program that we had. And because we realized how helpful it was to SMEs, this year we shared it with our ASEAN counterparts. So as chair of the ASEAN Capital Market Forum this year, the SE rolled out the ASEAN SEDG, which has been endorsed by the other 9 regulators across ASEAN. At the same time, while we aim to make the SEDG very simple to adopt, we realize that there are specific sectors in our economy that require a bit more guidance. So we do have sector guides that go into a bit more detail on the disclosures. We also have the guide available in Bahasa Melayu and Simplified Chinese. And there's a specific labor practices guide, which is particularly useful for companies in the construction sector, manufacturing, and agriculture. Okay, so before I go into the emissions calculator, last slide, this is the SEDG adopter program. So you can see that we've got quite a lot of large Malaysian companies listed on the program. So these are companies that have started to roll out the SEDG disclosures to their supply chain. And I encourage listed companies here in the audience, if you're not part of the program, it is free. Everything that we do is funded by the Capital Market Development Fund. What it provides is the opportunity for us to share the SEDG disclosures with your suppliers. It means being able to attend workshops that we put together that are specifically tailored to SMEs. Okay, so while we felt like the SEDG disclosures were very simple, the calculation of Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions was still quite confounding. I mean, even to us, so more so for SMEs. So at the start of this year, we started to build a GHG emissions calculator. We wanted to make sure that, again, it was simple, easy to use, free to use, available in multiple languages. So it is available in Bahasa Melayu and Simplified Chinese, apart from English. And it allows SMEs to go in. You don't have to register, you don't have to sign up. You can just put in your data and it will calculate your emissions for you. So I have, we did a user acceptance test to make sure that it was simple, to make sure that it works. So we ran this with 2 groups of SMEs. And the result is what you can see today. We do have a QR code that you can flash. But I want to bring up our consultant, Akhilan, so to talk you through the actual drop-down menus and how to use the guide, so that how to use the calculator, so that if you have SMEs that you require to get Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions data from, we think that you will find this really useful because it is really tailored to SMEs to make sure that we've given examples of where you can find the, what your bill looks like. So we've circled the part of the TNB bill where you should get your data. All of this is available in the user guide. So I'm going to stop here and bring Akhilan up to do the hard part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Navina. And firstly, let me extend my gratitude as well for everyone here today. Because we designed both the SEDG and the GHG emission calculator for the use of large listed companies here to reach out to your SME. So yeah, again, thank you for being here. Maybe circling back as well to why the purpose of the GHG emission calculator, right? Like Navina mentioned, make it as simple and as easy as possible for SMEs to calculate their Scope 1 and 2. So upfront, it will not be 100% correct, right? We exclude certain things because they're too complicated for SMEs, but we ensure that it's 80, 90%, it's good enough to get a first estimate for SMEs to provide to you the scope 3 data. I would venture to guess that most of you get your scope 3 data right now from spend-based emission, meaning you get a spend-based emission factor, and then you use it based on how much you spend on that. But with the calculator, what we try to do is to get mainly activity-based data, meaning emissions that come directly from the SME's activities. We also pair that activity with a specific emission factor, and I'll show you which emission factors we use. And we make it as simple as possible. So it's a simple X times Y equals Z calculation that the SMEs can understand that is still accurate. So this is how the homepage looks. And we have the methodology, the guide, and then also about the calculator. And if you click on the start calculating section, what you will come to first is the welcome page where the SME is required to provide some information about themselves. As Navina mentioned, the calculator is free to use. It's accessible to everyone. You just have to provide a few pieces of information, the size of your company, just within a range, the sector that you're in, just so that capital markets gets an idea as well, and of the sector that the company that's putting the data in. But it's still fully confidential apart from that. So we start first with the scope 1 emissions. And the first step really is selecting the fuel. So we have a range of fuels that are typically used by Malaysian SMEs, ranging from coal, diesel, gasoline, and the various biodiesel grades as well. And once you select the fuel, let's say you select natural gas, you can input your activity data in a set of units that is specific to that fuel, right? So for natural gas, for example, we have energy units like MMBTU and gigajoules, but you also have meters cube, which is a volume unit. For coal, the meters cube option will not be there. Instead, you'll have kilograms or tons. After you select your unit, all you have to do is enter your consumption data, and we provide 3 years of consumption data. And I'll show you why we put 3 years in there later on. But importantly, you can also add more stationary combustion sources, right? So you add up all your coal consumption, all your natural gas consumption, your diesel consumption, and you add as many as you need for the different source. And lastly, you repeat the exact same process for mobile combustion, right? So whether it's stationary, whether you're using a boiler versus mobile, where it's a forklift or a van or a company car, etc. Then moving to scope 2, same principle, but instead of choosing a fuel source, what you're choosing is which grid you buy the electricity from. And just to keep in mind, for scope 2, we only focus on purchased electricity. As you probably know as well, there's other forms of purchased energy. You can purchase steam, heating, cooling, but from doing our research and from communicating with the SMEs as well, most SMEs in Malaysia don't have to buy heat, steam, cooling from an external provider. If they need steam, they generate it themselves. So we focus only on what's relevant, so we only put purchased electricity in here. And from the different regions you can select, you'll obviously have the main ones: Peninsular Malaysia, TNB, Sabah Electricity, and Sarawak. And we also added Kulim High Tech Park because they have a separate electricity provider for all the companies in there, which is Nur Power. So they would have a separate emission factor as well. So SMEs from Kulim High Tech Park can still use the calculator. Then you select your units. We put both kilowatt hours and megawatt hours in there. So it's easier for the SME. They don't have to do it's a simple times 1,000 divided by 1,000 calculation, but we still try to make it easier for them so they can select which one is relevant. And then they input their data, right, for each calendar year. And add more if they have operations in multiple regions. And in theory, that's it for scope 1 and 2. That's all the SME has to input for us to calculate their scope 1 and 2 emissions to a 80%, 90% degree of accuracy. So many of you here will say, okay, there are some things that are missing. So let me acknowledge that, because you might not have time for questions. So scope 1, we don't have fugitive emissions. Like Chairman Dato Faiz mentioned, like methane from cattle, from cows, we don't include that because it's very, very sector specific. They're not applicable for most SMEs, so no need to complicate that. We don't have fugitive emissions from refrigerants, right? R12, R21, whatever refrigerant you use in your air conditioning. because that will be only the leakage amount, which is very small. And unless you have large air conditioning services, which most SMEs don't, it won't be relevant for you compared to your stationary and mobile combustion. Okay, so upfront, those are the exclusions to make it as simple as possible for SMEs. So now the question is that enough? Can you just take those scope 1 and 2 emissions and use them for your scope 3 emission? So actually no, right? Because not all of their scope 1 and 2 emissions will be your scope 3 emission, right? They have tens, hundreds of customers that they supply to, right? So what you actually need is this intensity, the tons of CO2e per ton of product, or per million ringgit or per ringgit of revenue. And then you can use that to calculate how much of those emissions you need to account for in your scope 3. So we keep this as optional for now for the SMEs in case they are hesitant to put in their revenue data. In theory, you could also calculate this yourself by getting their revenue from SSM or so on. And then you just divide their total emissions by their revenue. But again, we keep this optional for the SME. So once you submit these 3 steps, you can already download your results in either PDF format or in Excel format. So we wanted to include both formats because a lot of SMEs do their accounting in Excel. So it'll be easy for them to copy paste data and they're familiar with the formatting as well. But we also wanted it to be visual for the SMEs to understand what their emissions look like. And that's why we asked for 3 years of historic data so they can actually see what their progression of scope 1 and 2 emissions are over the years and also what their intensity is, right? Because their scope 1 and 2 might go up because they're growing, they're expanding, they're having more production. But their intensity might come down if they've been doing the right things, if they've been installing solar, increasing their energy efficiency, etc. Right? So we wanted to plot both these metrics, and you can see that in the PDF report. Last but not least, just wanted to highlight as well for all the assurance providers and auditors out there, we also had you in mind when we designed this calculator. So we also wanted everything, all the data that we use, all the methodology to be as transparent as possible. So we didn't put this in the main report because we don't want to overwhelm the SMEs. But where the user guide is, once you click on that and you can download it, you'll see that we list out all the emission factors that we use in the calculator. We tell you exactly where they're from. So they're based on the GHG protocol guidance. Use the IPCC AR6 emission factors, which are the latest ones. And we also tell you how we do the unit conversions, the global warming potentials, right? For scope 1. For scope 2, exact same logic. We have all the emission factors listed out. Of course, we only have the emission factors from the Energy Commission up to a certain year, which is 2022. So as they release it, that would have to be updated. Yeah, and we say exactly which document we take it from as well. So that is, in essence, how the SED, the GHG emission calculator for SMEs works. We really hope that you guys can use it and it will be useful for you to reach out to your SMEs because using the spend-based emissions factors can work for now, but eventually, at least for your main top 3, 4, 5 suppliers, you will need to get real activity data-based emission factors and emissions. Yeah, that would be all from me. Thank you so much for your attention. I'll pass it back.
Thank you very much, Akhilan, for a step-by-step process of using the SEDG calculator. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we move to the final session of the day. This is a panel session that explores how sustainability data and insights can drive better operational decisions and improve overall performance. Joining us today is Ms. Yong, the Chief Sustainability Officer of TNB, and Encik Masdi Abdul Karim, Senior Director of SPAN, as well as Mr. Khai Chiat, a partner of PwC Malaysia, who currently leads the Data and Analytics and Financial Services Technology Risk Solution. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage our panelists for today.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So this will be the last session. Actually, there's a couple of points that we'll be covering with the panel today. First is around utility data. Utility data is around energy and water. It actually forms a critical foundation for sustainability reporting, particularly for Scope 2 and also Scope 3, which is water-related emission. Many PLCs faces challenges in assessing consolidated historical utility data. For one, right, I was supporting one of my colleague, Farhana, in doing some of the assurance work. The amount of electricity bill that I need to flip, to get that data, my fingers grew muscle somehow. And also the inconsistency, I would say inconsistency, but the difference between how certain electric company report GHG emission inside that bill versus another one, maybe in a foreign country, actually is very different as well. Then we have to have the rationale as well. So beyond compliance, robust utility data enables companies to identify efficiency gains, reduce costs, inform operations and investment decision. So for this session, we'll pivot from a technical reporting to practical value creation, showing how sustainability data can drive business resilience, competitiveness, and also long-term growth. I'm honored to have with me Yong, which is the Chief Sustainability Officer of Tenaga Nasional Berhad. Yong currently is the CSO of Tenaga, and Tenaga being a utility company, and she is also previously the CRO of Tenaga. So this is a very well positioned to understand the risk perspective and also bringing risk forward from a sustainability perspective as well. So in her role, Yong spearheaded company sustainability initiatives, ensuring that TNB operates at meticulously aligned with ambitious sustainability goals, particularly in the aspiration of achieving net zero emission by 2025. Sorry, 2050. I discounted 25.
It's a new target for me.
Sorry, I was just catching everyone's attention as well. Okay. So with her unwavering commitment to implementing sustainable practice is instrumental in enabling TNB resilience and securing its long-term success. So 2050. Encik Masdi is the Senior Director, Strategic Planning and Transformation Division of Suruhanjaya Perkhidmatan Air Negara, SPAN. Encik Masdi is a strategic business leader with more than 27 years of diverse experience spanning the engineering service, manufacturing, education, regulatory sector. He currently serves as the Senior Director of the Strategic Planning Division of SPAN, where he drives national strategy for sustainability, water governance, industry transformation, and regulatory excellence across Peninsular Malaysia and Labuan. At SPAN, Encik Masdi leads the formulation and execution of long-term strategy, organization reviews, and performance monitoring using balanced scorecard methodology. He oversees the development of KPI dashboard, strategic scorecards, ensure alignment with Malaysia regulatory priorities. He also leads SPAN's environment, ESG, initiatives spearheading sustainability program representing Malaysia in international dialogues and water service and policies. So welcome both Yong and Encik Masdi. I think just to start off this session, I would just like to understand from a TNB perspective, right? And TNB is our national electric company and main part of Scope 2 reporting for a lot of organizations as well. How do you see TNB role in helping the nation achieve the sustainability agenda as a whole, right? Maybe Yong, yes.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I wish, first of all, thank you for the invitation for this session. I would like to take today's session into two big parts. One is how TNB decarbonize. So that's why the net zero will come into the picture, because as we know, our Scope 1 will be everybody's Scope 2. I think this will be the concern on everyone. So maybe I would like to also take the opportunity before I share particularly on Scope 2, how TNB energy transition journey. So as we know that in Peninsula, the energy landscape will be TMB is 50% generation mix. Then the other 50% we have our IPP on board as well. So particularly in TMB, we still have about 50% on coal, and then we have 30% on gas and 20% on renewable energy, including hydro. So TMB, we have our own energy transition pathway that is aligned with our country energy transition pathway, which we aim to achieve by 2050. We have 70% of renewable energy in this country, energy electricity industry. So what we are focusing, of course, in our generations and on screen now, we have our business landscape, as in we start with generation, we transmit, distribution, and as well as retail. We do have also our subsidiaries alongside to assist in decarbonizations of everyone. For example, through our G-Sparks, one of our subsidiaries, it will help for rooftop installation that will directly help our scope 2. And we also have our subsidiaries like TMBX and TMBES, who provides various energy efficiency solutions that will also directly help in scope 2. So coming back to the energy transition plan in the decarbonization, we know that in this journey, we need to take care of the energy trilemma, which we often say that we want to go sustainable, but at the same time, we need to ensure that our electricity is reliable and at the same time affordable. So how do we address that? That's why energy transitions will happen in phases. Of course, in our decarbonization effort, we have a very good carbon management plan in place, whereby we focus a lot on first with the existing fleet. What can we do? What are the low-hanging fruits? For example, in the coal plant, we focus a lot on low-hanging fruits like how to improve and optimize our heat rate. With that, then as a utility, we can emit lesser for the same megawatt of electricity that we generate. So a lot of efforts has been put in optimizing our existing fleet and even re-engineering and make it happen. So we have achieved quite a significant outcome in that sense. On top of that, we have our journey on expanding our renewable energy. I think that's alongside with our NETR of the nation's agenda, that we do have our 2.5 gigawatt hybrid hydro floating solar projects in the pipeline. So we can see that with the limitations of space, we are even looking into the hydro dam. On top of the hydro dam, that's where we have the potential within Malay Peninsula, we have 2.5 gigawatt that at the existing hydro dam, we can actually explore and install hybrid hydro floating solar. That's how we increase the RE stake. Now, of course, we are also in the pipeline exploring our hydrogen co-firing and things like that. So in that sense, we are taking care of our scope 1. And also in that sense, we also need to ensure that the grid is ready. So I think all of us heard of this. There's no energy transition without grid, right? So in terms of grid, we have also had in this regulatory period, we have a lot of capex that is putting in place to enhance and make our grid smart to be ready to receive the increasing numbers of renewable energy. And that also includes of the ASEAN power grid that we need to work with our neighboring country to ensure that we leverage on ASEAN countries' renewable energy sources as well as our grids, the smart grid per se, to ensure that the entire value chain of electricity can happen and can go green. Then, in effect, all of us in the scope 2, we can actually see a significance in numbers, because if we can look at coming back to the data, what we need to disclose for scope 2 is actually how much energy that we use times the emission factor. So whatever I have just explained is essentially help with the emission factor. Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of things that DNB is actually doing. How do you, I mean, just going back, TNB and a number of these areas, especially all the initiatives that's been done, how does data play a role and where do you use the data, right? From strategic planning, monitoring, remediation, and what are some of the indicators that you have?
Okay, in TNB, maybe I need to share our digitalizations of ESG indicators. So 2 years ago, we still have our ESG indicators everywhere. Also Excel, and also our people from the ground or power stations, they don't understand what HQ is collecting, right? I think everyone can sync with me that we are facing these issues. So two years ago, we started this digitalizations of ESG indicators journey. So because we see we really need the data, it helps with decision making. So the 3-year trend actually makes sense. If you understand the data, we can pave the strategy where we can decide on capital allocations and how much we need to put to prioritize all the ESG initiatives. So 2 years ago, we started with this data digitalization. We even have a manual to define each indicator, what it means to our business, and identify the source data. For example, scope 1. We actually work with our power plants, each power plants, the people who is in charge of the data to understand what are they keying in. And most of the data we try to not making adding burden to our team. We actually try to pull the data from the existing system that they already have. For example, our training data, HR will definitely capture our training hours, our respective learning journey already in the existing data. So ESG indicators will require you to have, for example, your safety training data, which is one of the ESG indicators. So what we have done is that we pull from system to system rather than asking everyone, the 36,000 staff, to submit their what is your safety data, training data, for example. So we took 2 years to digitalize, of course, still on the way. So currently we have about close to 300 indicators that's aligned with GRI, and based on the definitions and what is applicable to TNB and electric in industry. So I think that exercise actually helped with 2 things. First, we do have the data available, and I think it's also easy for audit as well. Second, through this whole exercise, we managed to talk to people from the ground and let them understand what are we collecting and what this data means to them. So, for example, the scope 1 data emissions, we actually track per power stations. Yes, you are coal plant, but actually you have room to actually improve your emissions. So through that exercise, people from the ground start to understand that, hey, every month, whatever that is published in the apps, I can see I'm slacking, for example, right? Then what else can I do? What did I do? What else can I do? What can I benchmark with other peers? What can I talk to OEM? How can I tune my hit rate better so that I emit lesser? So those are the things that alongside the digitalization program, we see that we actually putting a lot of practice and understanding on the ground. I think that's the real meaning on why we need to collect data and why we need to publish data.
Yeah, I think it's very good, right? I mean, the clarity on the data on the ground creates the awareness, and the awareness then creates actionable insights, right? Essentially, then the ground operating team will know, actually, I'm working to a certain target and I need to achieve this target, but what does it take to get to the target? I think that's a very important point, which nicely goes to Inche Masdi, is that, as you know, water is a lifeblood. Too much water, a problem. Too little water, also a problem, right? So as a regulator in the industry, what are some of the initiatives that SPAN is doing in promoting sustainability, especially on the water players in the industry?
Okay, thank you, Casey. First of all, I would like to thank Secretary's Commission for inviting me to be part of this forum discussions. You know, Casey, the most difficult part of this panel discussion when you are in the final sessions, because everybody are looking at you and wondering when, if the panelists will make your presentation shorter so that they can leave early. Anyway, before I start my presentation today, I would like to put the best to put things into context that we are actually different from what the NB role is, because we are actually a regulatory body. So our sharing today, my sharing today might be a little bit different because it is from this perspective of a regulatory body. Okay, can I have the... Okay, just to put things in context, first of all, when we talk about water services industry governance, there are 5 bodies involved, headed by our Petra, Ministry of Energy Transition and Water Transformations. We also have state governments as one of the main body that involved in the governance. We have National Water Council or Majlis Air Negara, led by our PM, and also consisted by every MBs in all the states. And then comes SPAN into the picture, where we regulate water supply and services in Peninsular Malaysia as well as Labuan Federal Territory. And finally, we have so-called our strategic regulator partners, namely such as JPS, MOH, and some local authorities that govern into their respective jurisdiction. Okay, just a little bit about SPAN. We are established in 2007. This year is already about 18 years in existence. We are actually a body which governs the economic and social and also technical aspects of water supply. Right. So looking at this diagram, at the right hand side, the bottom right, it is where the cycle start. We start from water sources, but our jurisdiction is actually come when water sources come into the water treatment plant. That is where we start until the water distribute to up to the consumer meter. So that is the first part where SPAN in authority. Then what happened in the consumer's house is up to them. So when they discharge back into the sewage system, then SPANs continue to play a role there until we treated the sewage and it came back to our water sources. This is the full cycle of water industry. Again, I would like to reiterate that our SPAN jurisdiction is only on the water supply services. So this will give some actually limitations and challenges for us to make sure the water supply services is continue without any major interruptions. Okay, next slide. Okay, when we talk about sustainability in water services industry, basically we are very, very new in this sustainability journey. In fact, in SPAN, we started sometimes in 2023. We are very small. The unit is very small, and we are still small. But we need to manage all the whole water services industry. What happened is that we bring all together all the 12 main water operator in Peninsular Malaysia as well as in Labuan, together with us so that we can start gathering all the data for the GSG accounting and management. Again, as of now, we just completed scope 1 and scope 2. For scope 3, still far away. We still try to understand what we want to capture, because there are some challenges on that, but I will explain later in the next slide. So, of course, there are a lot of capacity building happening in water services industry with related to sustainability. In fact, yesterday we have our own ESG seminar held at World Trade Center. This is although we started in 2023, we already have a continuous seminar or conference related to ESG. Where we bring together all our stakeholders to actually understand and gain some knowledge on this sustainability journey. Right. Okay. As a snapshot, we are actually subscribing to a system that called low carbon operating systems. Where the system is developed by Malaysian Green Technology Corporation, MGTC. Currently, there are about 380 sites registered, mainly all the water treatment plants in the states where we regulate. Okay. Where we want to go next? Okay, this is for 2025. Again, as I mentioned earlier, during this year, a lot of workshop has been conducted together with all the water operators as well as storage operators, so that we can understand and actually decided what category under all the 15 that we want to actually started to gather the informations. Because when we talk about water operators, most of our water, except few, they are actually very small size, where data is actually very not to say no data, but sometimes there's no standard in the data, as well as some data is, I can say data is everywhere. Because of the fragmented jurisdictions in water services, so it makes some challenges in this data gathering. Okay, what I want to share to all of you, currently we are working with MGTC. So MGTC is the leader of this initiative, where we started to develop what we call emission factor for water services industry. So the activity has been going on since early of this year. We targeted to complete by end of the year. So we are expecting sometimes next year, we will have our own emission factor for water services industry. Of course, when we said that we are in the midst of capacity building for all our stakeholders. Again, currently we are actually in the stage of gathering all the data and make sure the data is standards, so that we can have similar data for all the stakeholders that our industry player. So it's still far away from any mitigation of adaptation initiatives, but we are looking forward to complete that as soon as possible. Okay, this is some of the framework that we developed for water services industry. And again, as I said earlier, we are very small. Everything has been done internally. We haven't engaged for through any consultants or not. We just make it. We just do it, and from time to time we learn from all other commission as well as other organizations in terms of sustainability. I think I stop there first. Back to you, Casey.
Thanks, Masdi. Very interesting, because I myself, about 5 years ago, I was speaking to a water operator. They were already talking about predicting the water supply and demand of a certain state. And what will happen, the scenario of 2030 or 2050, various scenario, industrialization, non-industrialization, drought, non-drought, agriculture impact, commercial impact, residential impact. There's so many scenarios in this kind of situation. And notwithstanding the mitigation that can be applied, right? That's what I understand. Mitigation is, do we build one more dam? Maybe that's a collaboration with PNP. Do we build one more dam? Do we recycle water? Do we channel water? That I think is very interesting. Right? So a lot of this depends on data. That's what I say. And sometimes you can't get the actual data because you're predicting the future. And I think, Puyong, your side as well, there's a lot of data set that's required for your 300 plus indicators. So what is the foundation actually to form or to have a good quality, trusted, at least close to perfect or close, something that you really can rely on? How do you achieve that? Given that, but Inches Masdi saying data is everywhere, so scarce, right? What is the right data to pick up and how could we trust it? What are some of the things that you would do?
I think digitalization is something that we focus on and we see result. I will take one example that I think answer questions of Scope 2. Using Scope 2 is one of the many indicators that we need to disclose. I mentioned 200 plus that we actually digitalize. So one of it is Scope 2. So backtrack, when we starting to see, I think we have to know the definition of what is Scope 2, right? So from Scope 2, we know that is the utilization, kilowatt hour, times our emission factor. So as a CSO, I need to think, how many TNB bills for all of you, so how many TNB bills I need to collect? So for Tenaga per se, at that point of time, we actually first step is to scan how many assets I have that I need to actually monitor. So that exercise actually took us quite a while because TNB, we have our power stations that has, each power station will have many meters as well. Then we have our buildings. Then we have our substations, PMU, main intake. We have our PPU, PE. So in total, we have 90,832 assets that we need to look into their utilization bill. So what we have done is we actually work within TNB, we work with our retail team and look into the possibility that, is there a possibility we digitalize it? Means every month, all these 90,000 assets get the bill record. How can we pump into a platform that by one click, I know how much? Then I can know who actually utilized more or even threshold. Because at the end of the day, we cannot stop our people from our business from, you don't use electricity. We still need to run our business, right? But I think the more meaning one is, are you using it in the right manner? Are you optimizing it? I think that is where the energy efficiency comes into the picture. So we do, once we actually link that and manage to digitalize all these 90 over 1,000 assets, we're able to, by one click, have a platform to see, okay, how's the utilization? And have meaningful discussion in HQ, in the boardroom, to see that, is this what we want? Is this the capital that we want to invest? Is this the re-engineering that we want to do? So now, what we can, like Tenaga per se, our Scope 2 reporting, by one click, we can know, okay, this month, which asset, the 90 over 1,000 asset, that actually beyond the threshold, that's within the threshold that we set. So I think this process actually helped us a lot. Yeah. So in fact, 2 months, probably sometimes ago, Dato Faiz has actually met my CEO, and then we have spoken about this and how can we help the industry and how can Tenaga has this using our own experience and extend this to everyone. So yeah, I'm happy to share that one of our subsidiaries, TMBX, they will be able to assist using our experience in Tenaga. So all the CSO who has or preparer who needs this, you actually can get in touch with TMBX. So this is using our own Tenaga experience. We are extending this to everyone that you can actually collect your bills in a way, digitalize it, and even come to a final figure on how much is my scope. I hope that this will actually can help everyone, in making our data collections easier. But again, the main thing is first, as a business, we must understand how many assets that we have, how many assets that is within our disclosure requirements. I think that one we need to know first. Then only we can go to the next step on how can we link that into the system. And by one click, you can actually know, okay, this month, how much is my utilization as well as emission in terms of scope 2.
Yeah, I think another point is that by not working too late in office by vouching the bill also save some electricity as well, right? Okay, AJ Masdi, I mean, from a regulator perspective, do you see that, all the utility companies really coming together, supporting SPAN's agenda and what are some of the challenges as well, potentially?
Okay, for water services industry, like I mentioned just now, there are various categories of water operators. Some of them are very big and they have their parent company who actually can support them in terms of financial capability. But most of our water operators is very small, and they are relying on the fund given by the state's government. So when we talk about data gathering or data collecting, frankly, most of our water operators, their focus priority is only on their operation to make sure that our water supply is actually continuously supplied to all our consumers, rather than trying to invest on these data collections or gatherings. But again, with the support from us, we are actually initiating this initiative, so that everybody started to look at what they should collect and how they can use the data for, especially when we talk about our operation. They have some issues in order for them to actually invest in all the digitalizations, technologies, and whatnot, because they don't. Their current operation is only limited or just sufficient enough for them to run their operations, their daily operations. So that's why, however, when we talk about continuous supply or sustainability in water services, again, we cannot leave that demand is actually should be equal to supply, so that the water services can be sustained. But in order to do that, data, of course, the data is very, very vital in order for us to do all the planning and also forecastings. But again, like I mentioned earlier, the fragmentation of the jurisdiction is actually one of the main challenges that we have. Again, data is everywhere. It's up to us how we want to collect all the data and make sure the data is actually relevant and also standardized for us. So this is where actually SPANs come in, together with our ministry, now Petra. Actually, it started in the last ministry, and RECC, if I'm not mistaken, where we are actually work together with EPU, economic planning units, we started to develop a platform that we call Data Industry Perkhidmatan Air Negara Special Mapping Interactive. The short form is DEPINE SMI. So this is the phase 1 of this platform. It already started sometimes in 2024, where we actually collect all the data from the first one is water resources, water supply, and also sewerage. So these 3 areas in this phase 1, we collecting all the data related from all the water operators. We integrate and standardize, and we put it into this platform, DEPINE SMI. So this platform, we targeted to be completed by early of 2027. So there are about 10 dashboards that can be viewed later, where we share the key facts about water services industry. As an example, maybe the demand, the water interruption, or the NRW and whatnot, which is happening at every state. So SPAN, our role is actually we are the caretaker of the system currently because it is still under development. I'm not sure what is the future direction of this platform. Perhaps it will be going back to the ministry. I'm not sure because at this stage it's actually on the gathering of the integrating and also standardizing of the data. So we hope that by completing this platform, it will actually solve all the data issues of water services industry. And on top of that, we actually started to plan on the phase 2 of this platform because at this stage, we are only working together with all the water operators. But in reality, as again I mentioned just now, data is everywhere. It's not only water operators are collecting the data. We also have our PVTs. We also have our MOH in terms of the water quality. We also have NAHRIM and whatnot. So a lot of actually players in this industry that are keeping their own data. So that is where we hope that by establishing this platform, we'll then actually collecting all the necessary data, and it can be more useful after the integration. Thank you.
I think that's really good. So I think to just recap this whole session is that essentially there's a lot of data, and as you can see, many players in the industry they're not selfish in a way. They're also giving the data back to the society. But getting it to what we call investment grade data, trustable data, most probably a lot of organization needs to put in certain level of governance framework, such as data governance framework, to make sure that, it's a collective decision that the users of the data can trust the elements of the data and the quality of data coming out. So I think we are left with about 2 minutes. We might have some questions, but on the Slido. So maybe I'll just pick 1 or 2 lucky questions out from the Slido, if that's okay.
Apologies, Casey. The Slido questions are here, so I'll just read them out if that's okay. So the first question is actually for Ms. Liu regarding emission factors. So this one is specifically on energy emission factors, and then they are requesting whether it can be published a bit sooner, like the latest emission factors. I understand that it's actually from Suruhanjaya Tenaga, but perhaps you can clarify that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like I mentioned, TMB is about 50%, so another 50% is IPP. So the emission factors is actually calculated by the regulators, and it's also published in our SD website. We do reckon that there's a gap in terms of if you log in now to SD, if I'm not mistaken, it's 2022 emission factors, which means there is a lagging. Yeah. So together, I think with even Bursa, we have actually met with the single buyer as well as SD and trying to work on how else can we expedite But I think with the implementation of NFRS, that everyone needs to be very, very clear on your admissions. I think this can be expedited. So from Tenaga's perspective, we are assisting, we are connecting, and hopefully we can put this even faster. Yeah, this is also something that we want, yeah, from Tenaga side.
Perhaps one more question for Encik Masdi. So there's a question for yourself. You said the data collection for demand and supply is a challenge. Why would that be, and why was it not done earlier? That was the question.
Okay. Remember I mentioned just now on the categories of our water operators, there are some actually financial viable, like a big major company like Islang or SEDG, Penang. So this company, they don't have that issue because they have the financial capability to invest on the right systems. But some of the small operators, they even don't have any systems. They have to rely on us as SPAN, as they are using our systems to just to record all the transactions, and especially on the demands and supply related informations. So that's described actually how it will be an issue or challenges to water service industry, because some states where industrial activities is not that much compared to Selangor, if I can compare, like maybe Perlis or Kelantan's, so that their incomes is actually not that big as the states that have a lot of industrial activities happen. So when this revenue is very limited, their focus will be, their priority will be more on their operation activities rather than their systems. So I hope I answered the questions. Thank you.
With that, I think we are short of time, and I believe there's definitely a lot of questions as well. I think from the SC organizer, the contacts are available. Not only contact, just remember data also available as well, right? So with that, I'd like to thank Yong and Encik Masdi as well to be honored panelists this morning.
And that brings our session to a close, ladies and gentlemen. We would like to thank everyone for your participation. We trust that you have benefited from the sessions today and have a bit more clarity on the pivotal role that data plays in your sustainability reporting journey. As a gentle reminder, the ACSR posts guidance materials and upcoming training sessions on the NSRF microsite. So that's available there on the QR code. Our next available training sessions, titled the NSRF Preparers Program, using the ISRs in your sustainability reporting, is scheduled on 23rd October and 3rd December. So you may scan the QR code to register. I'd just like to highlight that it is HRDC claimable. And should you have any questions on the NSRF or sustainability reporting in general, please feel free to post them to the dedicated NSRF email on the screen. So we've prepared a simple lunch at the atrium, so we kindly request that everyone slowly make your way there. And finally, before you leave, gentle reminder, please return your tags, the tags that were given out today at the security at the lobby of the ground floor. Thank you very much, everyone.